Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey, but not the kind with fluffy pillows and a soft landing. We're going back in time, all the way to the 11th century, to a world of dust, steel, and unshakable belief. Imagine for a moment that you've just signed up for the First Crusade. You've heard the fiery sermons of Pope Urban II. Maybe you've even met a monk or two who promised untold riches and salvation. You've sold your small patch of land, kissed your family goodbye, and are now standing in a field somewhere in France, surrounded by thousands of other hopeful, and let's be honest, slightly confused people. You're not a knight, not a lord, you're a peasant, maybe a petty noble, with little more than the clothes on your back and a vague idea of where you're going. The sun beats down, a fly buzzes past your ear, and the smell of unwashed bodies and nervous sweat fills the air. This isn't a grand adventure movie, this is gritty reality. You probably wouldn't last a day, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you feel like it, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can all feel connected, even across the miles. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first day as a crusader is a reality check. You're not in a grand army with shining armor and banners waving in the wind. You're in a massive, sprawling mob of humanity. Think of it less as a military force and more as a pilgrimage that got way out of hand. You are instantly disoriented. Your village was small, predictable. This is chaos. There are people speaking a dozen different dialects, all huddled together, cooking meager meals over smoky fires. Your armor, if you even have any, is a rough, uncomfortable mess. Maybe it's a padded leather jacket. Maybe it's a dented helmet your uncle gave you. You can already feel the chafing. You find yourself a small patch of ground. Roll out a thin blanket and try to get some sleep. The ground is hard, the sounds are new, and the cold of the night seeps into your bones. This is your new home, at least for a while. The main motivation for most people, you're told, is piety. It's the promise of a plenary indulgence, a complete absolution of all your sins, guaranteeing you a spot in heaven. This wasn't some minor perk, it was a cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card. You also hear rumors of unimaginable wealth in the East, and a chance to escape the feudal burdens that have weighed you down your entire life. For many, this was the first chance they'd ever had to own their own destiny, however short-lived that destiny might be. The truth is, it was a complex mix of faith, greed, and a deep-seated hope for a better life, however improbable. Now for a historical fact. Most of the people who joined the First Crusade weren't the noble knights we see in movies. A vast majority were peasants and urban poor who had very little to lose. This mass migration of impoverished people was a logistical nightmare for the leaders. They had to feed, water, and organize tens of thousands of people who were essentially civilians on a very long walk. A curious tidbit you might not know is that many people brought their entire families with them, including women and children, believing it was a divinely ordained, safe passage to the Holy Land. Can you imagine bringing your toddler on a hike through a dozen hostile territories? It's not exactly a stroll in the park. Historians still argue whether the Crusades were primarily an act of religious devotion or a land grab disguised as a holy war. You, as a new recruit, probably don't care. You're just trying to find a decent place to relieve yourself without being seen, and you're learning that privacy is a luxury of the past. The sense of community is strong, though. You share a meal with a man from a neighboring village and he tells you stories of his family. He has a simple, trusting face, and for a moment, you feel like you're not so alone. This is the glue that holds this fragile army together, a shared mission and a shared misery. It's not glorious. It's just human. You look up at the stars, a million miles from home, and you wonder what tomorrow will bring. Probably more dust. Your first full day on the road begins before the sun, as a cacophony of bells, shouts, and braying animals pierces the pre-dawn mist. This isn't a march. It's a stumbling migration. You fall into a line with your fellow pilgrims. Their faces a mix of grim determination and weary resignation. The road is little more than a dirt track, churned into a fine, choking powder by the thousands of feet and hooves that came before you. With every step, a cloud of dust rises and coats your clothes, your skin, your very lungs, Breathing becomes a chore. The grand, noble purpose that fueled your journey back in the village now feels very, very far away. All you can focus on is the rhythm of your feet, the hot sun on your back, and the constant grumble of your stomach. You're a human Roomba, just going, going, going. The sheer scale of this travelling mob is difficult to comprehend. The primary Crusader armies, led by figures like Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond of Toulouse, were so vast they had to split up and take different routes to avoid completely depleting the resources of the towns they passed through. This wasn't a tactical decision so much as a basic necessity for survival. You're part of a procession that stretches for miles, an endless human river flowing east, and with this many people, you quickly learn that the greatest danger isn't an enemy army, but your own companions. You hear stories of minor brawls breaking out over a crust of bread or a drink of water, and you quickly learn to keep a close eye on your meager possessions. The journey across Europe is a relentless test of endurance. You trudge through forests where the shadows feel thick and menacing, and across open plains where there's no relief from the scorching sun. The roads are not paved, there are no road signs, and the maps, if they even exist, are laughably inaccurate. You navigate by the sun and the stars, and the hope that the person in front of you knows where they're going. Spoiler alert, they probably don't. A curious tidbit you pick up is that some Crusaders would carry a small bag of earth from their homeland, to be buried with them should they fall. It's a small, heartbreaking link to a world they will never see again. You wonder if the guy who just bumped into you is carrying a bag of dirt from, say, a field in Normandy. You should probably ask him, or not. Probably best not to. A mainstream historical fact you begin to internalize is that the logistics of this march were a complete nightmare. European kings and nobles often didn't want this massive, unwashed army marching through their lands. They had to be convinced, cajoled, and sometimes threatened into allowing passage and providing supplies. The Crusader leaders would send envoys ahead to arrange for food and shelter. But these plans often fell apart, leading to desperate foraging and even outright plundering. This is how you find yourself scrounging for wild onions and berries in a field, feeling less like a holy warrior and more like a very confused scavenger. Historians still argue whether the People's Crusade, the initial, ill-fated wave of peasants that marched ahead of the main army, was a genuine religious movement or a complete disaster waiting to happen. You don't have to wonder. You see the evidence of their failure in the stories that trickle back to you, of starvation, mass slaughter, and a tragic, almost comical lack of preparation. It's a stark warning of what happens when faith isn't backed up by a solid plan and a full belly. You realize that your own survival hinges on a more organized approach. However chaotic it may seem to you now, as you walk, the sounds of your fellow Crusaders become a constant. Hypnotic hum, the creak of leather, the jingle of metal, the endless shuffling of feet. You just keep walking, one painful step after another, a river of humanity flowing towards an unknown destiny. You're well into the march now, and the relentless boredom of walking is punctuated by the constant, undeniable realities of Crusader life. First up, food. Your diet is, to put it mildly, a culinary wasteland. You are surviving on a grim assortment of bread, hardtack, and whatever you can forage or buy from local, often hostile, merchants. The bread is usually stale, full of bugs, and so hard you could use it as a weapon. The meat, when you get it, is likely salted to the point of being inedible, and you have to wonder how long it's been in that barrel. You remember the simple, rustic meals of your village back home, the stews, the roasted chickens, and it feels like a dream from another lifetime. Your body is a machine running on low-grade fuel, and you're constantly hungry. Then there's the water. It's either scarce or, if you manage to find a stream, it's suspiciously murky. You've seen men get terribly sick from drinking from a river that was probably also used as a latrine for the thousands of people who passed through before you. You learn to be wary. You learn to listen to the old hands who have been on the road longer than you. They teach you to add a little vinegar to your water, or to let it sit for a while, as if that would somehow purify it. It's a small, pathetic hope in a world where a clean drink is a luxury, and let's not forget hygiene, or, rather, the total lack of it. You haven't had a proper bath in weeks, your clothes are stiff with dirt and sweat, and they are, shall we say, a home for a variety of small, unwelcome tenants. Everyone around you smells, The air itself feels thick with the collective odor of unwashed bodies, animals, and the general filth of a massive, moving city with no sewers. It's a smell you'll never be able to forget. You start to feel itchy all the time, a constant, low-level irritation that gnaws at your nerves. You learn that the best you can do is find a quiet corner and try to pick a few of the more obvious fleas off your tunic. Fun times. A mainstream historical fact you absorb through this stinking reality is that disease, not combat, was the #1 killer of Crusaders. Outbreaks of dysentery, smallpox, and a host of other ailments would sweep through the camps with terrifying speed. In this close-quarters, unsanitary environment, one sick person could infect hundreds. There was a sort of dark humor about it. One day a man is sharing a meal with you. The next he's gone, his body unceremoniously left by the side of the road. A curious tidbit is that many Crusaders would try to treat these illnesses with bizarre concoctions. You hear of people trying to use spiderwebs to stop bleeding or using animal dung as a poultice for wounds. It's hard to imagine, but it's a reality born of desperation and ignorance. You learn very quickly that you're on your own if you get sick. The sheer scale of the waste produced by the crusading armies was also an enormous problem. The ground you walk on is a testament to the thousands of people who have come before. Historians still argue whether the long-term environmental impact of the Crusades was more devastating than the immediate human toll. You, of course, are more focused on the immediate human toll. You've heard whispers of the People's Crusade and their catastrophic march. They were so disorganized that they often plundered the very lands they were supposed to be passing through, making enemies of the local populations. You feel a pang of relief that you are with a more organized army, even if organized is a very generous term. You finally get a small break. You lean against a gnarled tree and watch the human tide flow past. A child is crying, a knight is trying to adjust his saddle, and a priest is praying loudly. You close your eyes for a moment, just to escape the sight and the smell of it all. This journey isn't a glorious pilgrimage, it's a test of endurance, a long, dirty slog toward an uncertain future. You try to remember the high-minded ideals that brought you here, but all you can think about is a clean shirt and a hot meal. After weeks of grinding travel, you finally get your first glimpse of a world utterly different from your own. You're leaving behind the familiar forests and fields of Western Europe and entering the Byzantine Empire. The change is immediate and jarring. The roads are better, surprisingly well maintained, and you start seeing signs of a highly organized, ancient civilization. The towns you pass through are walled and fortified, not with rough-hewn wood, but with impressive stone battlements. This isn't the chaotic mess you've grown used to. It's a world built on thousands of years of imperial power and bureaucracy. And they are not. You quickly realize, very happy to see you. The Byzantines view you with a mixture of suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. You're not a disciplined army, you're a swarm of dusty, unkempt pilgrims who've just shown up on their doorstep. The emperor, Alexios I Komnenos, is a famously shrewd and cautious man. His officials treat your leaders like a problem to be managed, not a glorious army to be welcomed. You're told to stick to specific roads, to not plunder the countryside, and to move on as quickly as possible. The language barrier is immense, and you quickly learn that a simple request for water can be met with suspicion or outright hostility. It's a culture shock that hits you harder than any physical discomfort so far. It's like showing up to a fancy dinner party in your pajamas, smelling of a swamp. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the Byzantine Empire was a massive, sophisticated power that controlled a significant portion of the Eastern Mediterranean. They had a complex political system, a professional army, and a rich cultural and religious heritage that was far older than anything you'd ever known. This clash of civilizations was inevitable. They saw the Crusaders as a threat, not a savior. They were pragmatic, and they knew that an undisciplined army could cause more problems than it solved. A curious tidbit you hear is that the Byzantines referred to the Crusaders not as allies, but as Franks, a generic, slightly dismissive term for Western Europeans, highlighting the cultural and political divide. The leaders of the Crusades, men like Godfrey of Bouillon and Bohemond of Taranto, are forced to swear an oath of fealty to the emperor. They have to promise to return any lands they conquer that were once part of the Byzantine Empire. You're too far down the chain of command to understand the political maneuvering. But you see the tension in the faces of your leaders. The distrust is palpable. You don't feel like you're part of a grand alliance. You feel like you're a pawn in a game you don't understand. being shuffled across a very large chessboard. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine distrust of the Crusaders was a legitimate fear of an unruly force or a calculated political move to weaken them and maintain imperial control. From your perspective, it's a terrifying new reality. You're in a foreign land with foreign rules, and you're dependent on people who clearly don't like you. You learn to be resourceful. When the locals won't sell you food at a fair price, you hear whispers of more, shall we say, direct methods. You see the darker side of your companions emerge as the pressures of the journey mount. You wonder what it will take to keep your own soul intact. The landscapes shift from rolling hills to more rugged, mountainous terrain, a visual metaphor for the difficult road ahead. Every step is a reminder that you're in a land where a simple wrong turn could mean disaster. The grand idea of a holy war is slowly being replaced by the brutal, day-to-day realities of a very long, very difficult journey. The further you march, the more you realize that the most dangerous enemy isn't an army with swords and shields, it's the tiny, invisible things that crawl inside you. Sickness is a constant companion on this journey, a relentless test of your body's limits. You see men coughing up blood, their skin yellowing with fever, and their bodies racked with dysentery. The disease spreads through the camp like wildfire, jumping from person to person with terrifying speed. There's no escaping it. Someone sneezes near your fire, and you just hold your breath and hope for the best. It's a gamble you're constantly losing. Medical knowledge is, shall we say, a bit of a mixed bag. The local healers and monks do their best, but their methods are a strange blend of folk remedies, superstition, and genuine, if rudimentary, herbalism. You hear of treatments that involve everything from chanting prayers over a sick man to applying a hot iron to his forehead to drive out the sickness. You watch as a man with a deep gash on his arm has it packed with cobwebs and soil, a cure that you're pretty sure is more likely to kill him than help. You're told this is the way it's always been, and you just have to trust that God will see you through. A mainstream historical fact you come to appreciate is that the majority of Crusaders never made it to the Holy Land. They died on the long, grueling march from disease, starvation, and exposure. The numbers are staggering. In some sections of the journey, the attrition rate was so high that it would have been more accurate to call it a plague than a pilgrimage. A curious tidbit you pick up is that some Crusaders, in their desperation, would drink a foul concoction of vinegar and boiled herbs, believing it would ward off the plague. The taste was so terrible that it was often hard to tell if you were more nauseous from the sickness or from the cure. You don't try it. You're not that desperate yet. The physical exhaustion adds to your vulnerability. You're always tired, always hungry, and always a little bit in pain. Your muscles ache from the constant walking, and every night you fall into a dreamless sleep that feels more like a collapse. You learn to recognize the signs of a man who is at his limit. The glazed look in his eyes, the slow, shuffling walk. You try to offer him a little of your meager rations, but he just shakes his head, already too far gone to eat. You feel a profound sense of helplessness. You're part of this massive, powerful army. But when it comes to the simple matter of keeping a man alive, you're all completely powerless. Historians still argue whether the high death toll from disease was a result of a lack of medical knowledge or simply the unavoidable consequence of moving so many people over such a vast distance in an unsanitary time. From your perspective, it doesn't matter. All you know is that the man from the village near yours, the one who carried the bag of dirt, is gone. You saw them put him in the ground without a proper burial, a simple cross marking his grave, just one among thousands. You realize that your own life is just as fragile, and that all the promises of glory and salvation might not matter if you can't even survive the next week. You keep walking, a prayer on your lips, hoping that you'll be one of the lucky few who makes it to see the holy city. The long march has finally brought you to your first major test. You're not fighting an enemy in an open field, but a city with thick stone walls. This is siege warfare, and it is a miserable, grinding, and terrifying affair. You're at the edge of the Crusader camp, looking at the city of Nicaea, a formidable fortress held by the Turks. The scale of the operation is massive. You're surrounded by an enormous, sprawling army, all of whom are now focused on one single, static objective. The rhythm of the march is replaced by a new, more tedious one, the rhythm of a siege. Your first job is probably digging. It's not glorious, it's not heroic, but it's essential. You are part of the nameless thousands who are tasked with digging trenches, building siege towers, or filling in the moat with earth and brush. The work is backbreaking, a constant struggle against the unforgiving sun and the ever-present threat of a counterattack from the city's defenders. Arrows and stones rain down from the battlements, and you learn to keep your head down and your shield up. The sounds of war are no longer a distant rumor. They are a constant, nerve-wracking reality. The thud of a catapult stone hitting the wall, the shouts of men, the clang of a smith's hammer as he repairs a piece of armor. This is the new soundtrack to your life. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the siege of Nicaea was a pivotal moment for the First Crusade. The Byzantine emperor, Alexios I Komnenos, had promised to help the Crusaders, but he was always one step behind. He sent troops to aid in the siege, but more importantly, he began secret negotiations with the city's defenders. A curious tidbit you hear is that the Byzantine general Tatikius secretly advised the Crusaders on how to construct their siege engines, giving them a much-needed advantage, of course. The Byzantines were also playing both sides. They promised the defenders of Nicaea safe passage if they surrendered to the emperor, not to the Crusaders. The political maneuvering is far above your pay grade, but you can see the result. You wake up one morning, ready for another day of digging, only to see the Byzantine banners flying from the city walls. Nicaea had surrendered to the emperor overnight, without a final, decisive assault by the Crusader army. There is a palpable sense of betrayal and frustration. The city you had worked so hard to besiege is now in the hands of the very people who had, until recently, been treating you with such suspicion. Your leaders are furious. They were promised the spoils of war, and they got none. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine emperor's actions at Nicaea were a clever, necessary piece of political maneuvering or a treacherous betrayal of his supposed allies. For you, the peasant, it's just another bitter reality of this grand expedition. You didn't get a chance to prove your bravery in battle. You didn't get any of the spoils, and you're still just as hungry as you were yesterday. You pack your meager belongings and get ready to march again, the taste of dust and disappointment in your mouth. You realize that a crusader's life is not just about fighting, it's about politics, betrayal, and a whole lot of digging. After the disappointment at Nicaea, you realize something fundamental about this entire enterprise. It's not a military campaign so much as a religious one. Your leaders may be worried about politics and strategy. But for you, the foot soldier, faith is the only thing that makes this journey bearable. You wake up to the sound of bells and the sight of priests offering mass. Their voice is a soothing contrast to the constant murmur of the camp. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the sound of chanted prayers. Religion isn't a Sunday activity here. It's the constant, undeniable backdrop to your life. You hear sermons every day, fiery speeches that remind you of the purpose of your sacrifice. The priests talk about the Holy Sepulchre, the very tomb of Christ, and the need to liberate it from the hands of the infidel. They speak of martyrdom and the promise of eternal salvation for those who fall in battle. This isn't just a promise, it's a living, breathing reality. You see men with small wooden crosses carved from a twig, or with a relic sewn into their clothes. You learn that some crusaders would carry a small scroll with a prayer written on it, believing it would protect them from harm. It's a testament to the power of belief in a world where you have very little else. A mainstream historical fact is that the Crusades were, at their core, a deeply spiritual movement. The concept of a holy war was something new to European Christendom. It was the Pope himself who had sanctioned it, promising a full absolution of sins for all who participated. This was the ultimate incentive, far more powerful than any promise of land or gold. The Pope's call was so powerful because it tapped into the deep-seated fears and hopes of a deeply religious society. A curious tidbit you learn is that many crusaders believed they were literally walking in the footsteps of Christ, and that the physical hardships of the journey were a form of penitence for their past sins. You see the power of this belief in the actions of your companions. When a man gets sick, his first thought isn't to find a doctor, but to pray. When a battle is going poorly, you hear the knights and foot soldiers alike shouting for God's help. Religion is not just a comfort, it is a weapon. It binds this disparate, unruly army together. It gives them a common purpose and a common enemy. It allows them to endure the starvation, the disease, and the constant threat of death. Historians still argue whether the religious fervor of the Crusades was a cynical manipulation by the Church to gain power or a genuine, Grassroots movement of popular piety. For you, it's just the air you breathe. You see the honest, unshakable faith in the eyes of the man praying next to you. He truly believes that by marching to the Holy Land, he is doing God's work. It's a powerful force, one that you yourself are starting to feel. You may not be a noble knight, but you are a soldier of God, and that thought gives you a measure of comfort in this difficult world. You remember that bag of dirt from section 2, a small reminder of home. But now you carry something else with you, a sense of divine purpose that's far heavier and far more important. With the disappointment of Nicaea behind you, the army pushes onward, a vast, hungry, and somewhat demoralized snake of humanity crawling across the Anatolian plains. The weather is getting hotter, the terrain more difficult, and the auras of the men are turning a shade of sour you can practically smell. But something else now catches your attention. You're finally getting a closer look at the people you're actually marching with, the knights. They are not the shiny, perfect warriors you imagined from the tales sung by troubadours. A knight's armor is an astonishing, and frankly terrifying, spectacle. It's not just a suit of steel, it's a testament to immense wealth and a deep-seated commitment to discomfort. A full suit of chainmail, for example, can weigh as much as 50 pounds. It's an intricate web of interlocking metal rings, meticulously crafted by an artisan who probably spent more time on it than you've spent on your entire life. Now add a padded gambeson underneath to prevent the chainmail from chafing your skin to shreds, and a heavy surcoat over it to protect against the sun and rain. Top it off with a conical helmet with a nasal guard that makes it difficult to breathe and impossible to see your feet. And you have a walking, clanking, extremely hot fortress of a man. A horse is a must, of course, because no one, not even a knight, can walk very far in that much metal. The most shocking thing, however, isn't the weight, but the cost. A single horse could cost a small fortune. A suit of mail was an heirloom, something passed down from father to son. This equipment represented a massive investment, a financial burden that only the very, very rich could afford. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the vast majority of crusaders were not knights. They were foot soldiers like you, or archers, or pilgrims, or camp followers. The knights were the elite, the heavy cavalry, the tank corps of the medieval battlefield. But they were a tiny minority of the force. A curious tidbit you learn from a talkative squire is that a knight's sword was often given a name. It wasn't just a tool, it was a companion, a piece of art, and a symbol of his identity. It's a bit like giving a name to your car, but with a lot more stabbing involved. You hear whispers of famous swords with legendary names, and you realize that every knight, no matter how small his holding back home, sees himself as part of a larger, epic story. You, on the other hand, are just trying not to get a blister on your big toe. Historians still argue whether the dominance of the heavily armoured knight was a tactical advantage or a logistical liability. They were slow, expensive, and a nightmare to keep supplied. They were incredibly effective in a direct charge, but in a world of ambushes and surprise attacks, they were often just large, clanking targets. As you watch a knight struggle to mount his horse, his squire helping him to heave his leg over the saddle, you get a good look at his face. He's not the stoic warrior from the songs. He's sweating, grunting, and he looks just as tired as you feel. For all his wealth and finery, he's just a man. You realize that you're all in this together, and in the end, it's not the armor that will save you, it's the will to keep going. The Crusader army is not a monolithic entity, it's a collection of feudal lords, each with his own contingent of knights, squires, and foot soldiers like you. This means that when you make camp at night, it's not a single, unified encampment, but a sprawling, disorganized series of smaller ones. You're part of a small cluster of tents and fires that belong to your lord, a man you've only seen from a distance on his horse. The camp is an endless sea of humanity, a temporary city of canvas and mud that springs up every night and disappears every morning. The boredom of camp life is a special kind of torture. There's no entertainment, no books, no music beyond the occasional sad song hummed by a tired companion. You spend your days doing menial chores, mending a torn tunic, sharpening a knife, or, if you're unlucky, standing guard duty. The nights are filled with the sounds of a sleeping army, a chorus of snores, the shifting of animals, and the low murmur of conversations. You sit by the fire, maybe share a story or a joke, and watch the embers die down. It's a life of endless, mind-numbing repetition, punctuated by moments of intense, life-threatening chaos. The squalor of the camp is something you've gotten used to, but it never gets any better. The ground is a patchwork of trampled mud and animal droppings, and the smell is an unholy mixture of unwashed bodies, stale food, and the constant smoke from 1,000 small fires. The lack of sanitation is a constant threat. You learn to stay away from the latrine areas, if you can even call them that, and you try to find a spot to relieve yourself as far away from the camp as possible. It's a losing battle. The entire camp is, for all intents and purposes, a giant, slow-moving biohazard. A mainstream historical fact you begin to understand is that the Crusades were a logistical nightmare because they were, in essence, a giant, unplanned road trip with no map and no supplies. The leaders of the army had to constantly forage and negotiate for food and water, and the vast numbers of people meant that resources were depleted almost as soon as they arrived. A curious tidbit you learn from a passing soldier is that many crusaders would gamble away their meager possessions in camp, playing dice or other simple games for hours on end to pass the time. It was a way to feel a little bit of control in a world where you had none. You even saw a knight, his armor polished and shining, playing a game of dice with a peasant. It was a strange, humbling sight. Historians still argue whether the social and economic bonds within the Crusader camps were a factor in their success. Was this shared misery a kind of glue that held them together, or a constant source of tension and division? For you, the answer is both. You've made a few friends, men who you trust and who trust you, and you share a laugh or a word of encouragement. But you've also seen fights break out over a stolen piece of bread, and you've seen the glint of suspicion in the eyes of a man who thinks you're trying to get a better spot by the fire. It's a fragile community, held together by a shared purpose, but constantly tested by the brutal realities of this life. You lie down and stare up at the canopy of your tent, listening to the sounds of the sleeping army, and you wonder what tomorrow will bring. Probably more dust. Remember that dusty, choking feeling from Section 2. It never goes away. The long, tedious march is finally over. You're no longer a pilgrim on a long road, you are a soldier, and you are about to face your first major battle. The location is a place you've never heard of, Dorylaeum. You're part of the vanguard, the force led by Bohemond of Taranto and Robert of Normandy. The air is thick with anticipation and a low hum of nervous energy. The enemy, a massive army of Seljuk Turks led by Kilij Arslan, is finally here. You wake up before dawn, the chill of the morning air raising goosebumps on your skin. You can hear the sounds of the horses being readied, the clanking of armor, and the low, guttural chants of the priests. You're given a meager breakfast, some hard bread and a swallow of water, and you're told to form a defensive circle. This is not the glorious charge you've heard about in stories. It's a tight, disciplined formation of men, standing shoulder to shoulder with shields locked. You're a human hedgehog, with a lot of very sharp friends. The attack comes with a speed and ferocity that is utterly shocking. The Turks are not like the enemies you've seen in European skirmishes. They are light cavalry, fast and agile, and they attack with a terrifying wave of arrows. The air is a storm of deadly shafts, and you hear the sickening thud of them hitting shields, and the horrifying cry of a man who takes one to the neck. You've never seen so many arrows in your life. You're told to keep your shield up and to hold your position, no matter what. The pressure on your shield arm is immense, and you can feel the constant impact of the arrows. It's a relentless, terrifying ordeal. A mainstream historical fact you're living through is that the Battle of Dorylaeum was a pivotal test for the First Crusade. The Turks' strategy of hit-and-run tactics, using their superior archery and mobility, was completely new to the European armies, who were used to pitched battles and close-quarters combat. A curious tidbit you pick up is that some crusaders, in their desperation, would try to catch the enemy's arrows in their bare hands. A practice you find absolutely insane. You just hope your shield holds up. You hear a knight next to you whispering prayers, his eyes wide with a fear that is all too familiar to you. The battle rages for hours. You are exhausted. Your arm is numb, and you can barely breathe through the dust and the smell of blood. You hear that the Crusader vanguard is being pushed back, that they are close to breaking. You start to think that this is it, that this is where your journey ends. But then, a new sound cuts through the chaos. the sound of horns and the heavy tread of more men. It's the main body of the Crusader army, led by Raymond of Toulouse and Godfrey of Bouillon, coming to your rescue. The tide of the battle turns. The heavy charge of the Crusader knights, a force the Turks have never seen before, breaks their lines. The Turks are forced to retreat, and the battle is won. You survived. Historians still argue whether the Crusader victory at Dorylaeum was a result of superior strategy or pure luck. From your perspective, it was a result of a lot of pain and a lot of praying. You look at the field, littered with the bodies of men and horses, and you feel a profound sense of relief. You made it, but you also realize that this is just the beginning. The road ahead is still long, and you've seen what the enemy can do. The sweet victory is overshadowed by the terrible cost, and you feel a new respect for the power of a single arrow. You remember the chaotic, messy march, and you realize that all of that was just the warm-up. This is the real thing. You can still smell the blood and the dust. It's not a memory you will ever forget. The victory at Dorylaeum, while a massive relief, doesn't solve the most immediate, pressing problem, water. As you push deeper into Anatolia, the landscape becomes drier, more arid, and the sun feels like a physical weight on your back. The rivers are scarce, and what little water you find is often a muddy, stagnant mess, churned up by the thousands of people who came before you. Thirst is no longer a minor discomfort, it's a constant, agonizing threat. Your lips are chapped and cracked, your mouth feels like it's full of sand, and your tongue feels swollen. You're a walking sponge in a desert. You learn the subtle signs of a man who is close to breaking from dehydration. The glassy look in his eyes, the feverish heat of his skin, the rambling, nonsensical words. You've seen men drink their own urine in a desperate, last-ditch attempt to survive. You see others drop by the side of the road, their bodies simply giving up. You no longer walk in a nice, neat line. The army is now a sprawling, desperate mess, with people fanning out in all directions in search of a trickle of water. It's a primal, life-or-death struggle, and it reduces everyone to the same level of animalistic desperation. A mainstream historical fact you're living through is the incredibly high death toll from dehydration and starvation. The logistics of supplying such a massive army in this inhospitable terrain were completely beyond the capacity of the Crusader leaders. The terrain was vast and empty, and there were no friendly towns to resupply from. The army was, for all intents and purposes, a self-sustaining disaster. A curious tidbit you hear is that some Crusaders would suck on pebbles to stimulate saliva production, a small, pathetic trick to fool your body into thinking it's getting some moisture. You try it, it doesn't work, it just makes you feel even more desperate. The exhaustion is compounded by the thirst. Every step feels like a monumental effort. You are no longer marching toward a holy city, you are just marching toward the next possible water source, a hope that is often dashed by the sight of a dried-up riverbed. You feel a new sense of humility. You've faced a terrifying enemy in battle, but you're being beaten by something far more elemental and simple, the absence of a necessity. This is not a glorious battle. This is a slow, methodical torture. Historians still argue whether the Crusader leaders' decision to press on through the harsh Anatolian terrain was a necessary evil or an act of profound strategic negligence. For you, the answer is irrelevant. All you know is that you're thirsty. You see the knights, for all their expensive armor and powerful horses, struggling just as much as you. Their heavy armor makes the heat even worse, and their thirst is just as real. They are not invincible gods, they are just men with more things to carry. You remember the man who was talking about that bag of dirt from Section 2, a memory that now feels like a warm dream. You would trade everything you own for a single cup of clean water. You trudge on, your mouth dry, your mind focused on one thing, and one thing only, survival. You have survived the brutal, sun-scorched plains of Anatolia. The victory at Dorylaeum and the endless struggle against thirst have changed you. You're no longer the wide-eyed pilgrim who left his home. You are a hardened, cynical veteran of this ridiculous war. The landscape is changing again. You're leaving the arid deserts behind and entering a more mountainous, green-tinged terrain. This new phase of the journey is no less difficult. The road to Antioch, a massive and historically significant city, is a long, winding, and often treacherous one. You are climbing now, up steep, rocky paths that are a nightmare for the horses and the heavy supply carts. The terrain is perfect for ambushes, and you're constantly on edge. You hear whispers of small skirmishes with local brigands and Turkish scouts, and you learn to keep your wits about you. The Crusader army is a long, vulnerable snake, and a small, determined enemy can inflict a lot of damage on its exposed flanks. It's a different kind of terror than the open-field battle of Dorylaeum. This is a quiet, constant, and nerve-wracking fear. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the Crusaders were now entering a region known as Cilicia, an area controlled by the Byzantine Empire but with a large and independent Armenian population. These Christian allies were a welcome sight, offering food, water, and shelter. You and your companions are ecstatic. After months of suspicion and hostility from the Byzantines and the Turks, you're finally in a land where you are welcomed. A curious tidbit you pick up is that the local Armenians, though Christians, spoke a completely different language and had different customs, leading to a strange, almost comical cultural exchange. You find yourself trying to communicate with them through a bizarre combination of hand gestures and broken Latin. It's like a very, very old game of charades. The political dynamics of the region are a tangled mess. You hear your leaders arguing with local Armenian rulers, trying to secure their loyalty and support. They need them for supplies and intelligence, but the Armenians are wary of the Crusaders, seeing them as a powerful but unpredictable force. The grand narrative of a united Christian army is starting to fray around the edges. Everyone has their own agenda, their own history of grudges and alliances, and you are just a small part of a much larger, more complicated picture. Historians still argue whether the Crusaders' interactions with their Christian allies, particularly the Armenians, were a genuine attempt at cooperation or a cynical exploitation of their resources. From your perspective, it was just a relief to have a full belly for a change. You remember the grinding hunger from Section 3, and you realize that a shared meal is a far more powerful diplomatic tool than any treaty or political maneuver. You're not thinking about the grand plan anymore. You're thinking about the warmth of the fire, the taste of a decent meal, and the simple comfort of being among people who don't want to kill you. The road ahead is still long, but for a moment, you feel like you can finally breathe. You even feel a faint sense of hope. You'll need it. You're heading for Antioch. The road to Antioch ends at the foot of its immense, intimidating walls. You've never seen a city so large or so heavily fortified. It's a city of legend, and now you are here, a part of the army that will try to take it. The scale of the task is truly daunting. Antioch is surrounded by a massive, high stone wall, punctuated by 400 towers. It's built on a steep hill, with a mountain at its back and a river at its front. It's an almost perfect natural fortress. You are now part of a siege, but this isn't Nicaea. This is the real deal. The first few days of the siege are a chaotic, disorganized mess. Your army, a massive force of tens of thousands, is spread out in a huge semicircle, with different lords and their armies assigned to different sections of the wall. The lack of central command is a major problem. It's like 1,000 different games of chess being played at once, with no one person in charge. You spend your days digging more trenches and building more siege towers, but this time, the enemy is not a passive target. They are well-equipped, well-fed, and they regularly sally out of the city gates to attack you, a constant, nerve-wracking threat. The weather turns. The pleasant autumn turns into a cold, wet winter. The mud is a thick, soupy mess that clings to your boots and makes every step a struggle. The constant rain is a misery, seeping into your clothes and making it impossible to get warm. You find yourself huddled around a small fire, shivering, your thoughts consumed by the cold and the hunger that is starting to set in. The supply lines are long and tenuous, and food is becoming scarce. You've been here for months, and there's no end in sight. The siege is becoming a slow, methodical war of attrition, and you're the one being ground down. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is that the siege of Antioch lasted for a grueling 8 months. It was a test of endurance that broke the will of many men. The Crusader army, which had been so large and powerful, began to dwindle in size as men deserted, starved, or died of disease. A curious tidbit you learn is that the Crusaders, in their desperation, would boil and eat the leather from their shields and boots to get a little bit of nourishment. You see a man trying to chew on a piece of leather, his face a mask of misery. It's a horrifying sight. But you understand the desperation. You remember the thirst from Section 11, and you realize that hunger is a different kind of pain, a constant, gnawing void that can never be filled. Historians still argue whether the long siege of Antioch was a sign of the Crusaders' remarkable patience and resolve, or a testament to their profound lack of strategic planning. Was this a clever tactic to starve out the enemy, or a colossal waste of time and resources? From your perspective, it was just a living hell. You're a human being, not a siege engine. The grand ideals that brought you here are a fading memory. All you can think about is the cold, the mud, and the gnawing hunger. You look up at the walls of Antioch, and they seem to mock you, a silent, unmoving testament to your misery. You remember the easy, simple life you once had, a life that feels like it belonged to another person. The siege of Antioch has become a living hell, and the greatest enemy is not the Saracens behind the walls, but the gnawing, all-consuming monster of famine. The cold. Wet winter has given way to a meager spring, but the food situation has only gotten worse. The supply lines are completely broken, and the surrounding countryside has been stripped bare of everything edible. You are no longer hungry, you are starving. The concept of a full belly is a distant, almost mythical memory. You find yourself doing things you never would have imagined. You and your companions are reduced to foraging for weeds and roots, chewing on the bitter, stringy fibers of whatever you can pull from the ground. The animals in the camp, the horses, the mules, the dogs, are not safe. You hear of men butchering and eating their own horses, their loyal companions, just to get a few mouthfuls of meat. The thought is horrifying, but you can't deny the hunger that drives them. A curious tidbit you learn from a grim-faced soldier is that many crusaders would secretly eat their fallen comrades' horses. A desperate and shameful act they would never admit to. The smell of burning horsehair and sinew hangs in the air, a constant reminder of your descent. A mainstream historical fact you are a part of is the profound moral decay that set in among the Crusader ranks. As the famine worsened, the grand ideals of the pilgrimage were replaced by a primal instinct for survival. Men who had once been brothers in arms would now fight over a scrap of bread. Theft and murder were not uncommon, and the discipline of the army broke down completely. Desertion was rampant. Men would try to sneak away from the camp in the dead of night, hoping to find a town where they could trade their last possessions for a meal. You can't blame them. You've thought about it yourself. The leaders of the crusade are not immune to this. They, too, are starving. You see them looking gaunt and desperate, their fine clothes hanging loosely on their frames. They try to give speeches to lift morale, to remind you of your holy purpose. But their words fall on deaf ears. How can you talk about a heavenly reward when your stomach is screaming for a loaf of bread? A new kind of hero emerges, the man who can find food, a man who can trade a spare piece of a weapon for a handful of grain. These men are not glorious knights, they are resourceful, pragmatic, and utterly consumed by the same struggle as you. Historians still argue whether the famine at Antioch was a greater test of faith than any battle they would face. It stripped away the trappings of honor and nobility, leaving only the raw, desperate human being beneath. It showed that even the most pious of men could be reduced to an animalistic state by the simple, brutal reality of hunger. You remember the simple meals from your village, the easy comfort of a full stomach. You remember the dust from Section 2, the thirst from Section 11, and you realize that every step of this journey has been a test, each one harder than the last. You are no longer a person on a pilgrimage, you are a ghost of a man, haunted by the memory of food, waiting for a miracle. Just as the morale of the Crusader army reaches its lowest point, a profound and unexpected event occurs, one that transforms the entire narrative of the siege. You're huddled by a fire, trying to stay warm, when a man begins to talk, not in a desperate whisper, but with a new, almost crazed fervor. He is a poor peasant named Peter Bartholomew, and he claims to have a vision. He says that Saint Andrew has appeared to him and revealed a secret, the location of the Holy Lance, the very spear that pierced the side of Christ on the cross. The story spreads through the camp like a wildfire. The leaders of the army, men like Raymond of Toulouse, are deeply skeptical. They have no time for the superstitions of a common peasant. But for you, the foot soldier, this is not superstition. This is a sign, a miracle, a desperate hope in a world that has given you nothing but pain. The rumor of the Holy Lance takes hold of the imagination of the starving, demoralized army. It's a promise of divine intervention, a sign that God has not abandoned you. It's the perfect antidote to the gnawing despair of the famine. A mainstream historical fact you are now a part of is the profound effect of the discovery of the Holy Lance, under the watchful eyes of the Crusader leaders. Peter Bartholomew leads a group of men into a church in Antioch. They dig for hours. And finally, they unearth a piece of metal, a relic that they claim is the Holy Lance. The effect is immediate and staggering. The mood of the army changes overnight. The starving, defeated men are now filled with a new, almost fanatical, courage. The discovery provides a sense of purpose and divine favor that no amount of food or rest could have provided. It's a moment of collective psychological transformation. A curious tidbit you hear is that the Holy Lance was actually just a piece of an old spearhead. The leaders of the army, despite their skepticism, understood the power of the symbol. They knew that the truth didn't matter, the belief did. You feel a profound sense of hope. The hunger is still there, the cold is still there, but now there is something else. A light at the end of the tunnel. You remember the simple faith from Section 7, the unshakable belief that brought you here. Now, that belief has a physical object, a tangible symbol of God's will. It's not just a story, it's a reality. The fear that had been gnawing at you for months is replaced by a new, almost reckless courage. You're ready to fight. Historians still argue whether Peter Bartholomew's vision was a genuine miracle, a clever hoax by the Crusader leaders to lift morale, or a desperate act of self-deception by a starving man. From your perspective, it was the thing that saved you. It turned a defeated mob into a zealous, unified force. It gave you a reason to keep going when all was lost. You are no longer just a man in a muddy camp. You are a part of a divine plan. The promise of the Holy Land, a fading memory for so long, now seems within your grasp. You grab your rusty weapon and stand tall. You're ready for whatever comes next. The miracle of the Holy Lance has transformed the Crusader army, but just as you feel a new sense of hope, a new and terrifying reality sets in. A large, well-equipped Saracen relief army, led by the Emir Kerboga of Mosul, has arrived. This is no small skirmish, this is a massive, unified force, and they've come to relieve the besieged city of Antioch. The tables have been turned. You are no longer the besieger, you are the besieged. You are trapped. The situation is dire. The Crusader army is now inside the city of Antioch, but they are still starving and exhausted. They have a new enemy on the outside, and an old enemy, the remnants of the Turkish garrison, on the inside. Kerboga's army is huge, far larger and better supplied than the one you faced at Dorylaeum. You hear whispers that they have brought engineers and siege engines, and that they plan to starve you out just as you tried to starve them out. It's a bitter, ironic twist of fate. A mainstream historical fact you are a part of is the stunning psychological shift of the Crusader army. Instead of cowering behind the walls, the leaders, now filled with a new, almost divine confidence from the Holy Lance, decide to attack. It's a bold, almost suicidal move. They decide to sally out of the city gates and face Kerboga's army in an open-field battle. It's a move that defies all conventional military logic. A curious tidbit you learn from a nervous companion is that the Crusader army was so small and so gaunt from starvation that they could fit through a single gate, one by one. A fact that would normally be a death sentence, but which now seems like a miracle. You're no longer a part of a mass of humanity. You're a part of a small, determined, and incredibly foolish force. The night before the battle, you hear the priests giving impassioned sermons. They tell you that God is with you, that the Holy Lance will protect you, that this is your final, glorious test. The words are no longer empty, they feel real. The men around you are no longer the gaunt, miserable wretches they were a week ago. They are now soldiers of God, ready to face their destiny. You yourself feel a new sense of purpose. The fear is still there, but it's overshadowed by a deep-seated conviction that this is meant to be. This is not a battle for land or for riches, this is a battle for your soul. Historians still argue whether the Crusader decision to attack Kerboga was a brilliant strategic move or a desperate Hail Mary born of desperation and blind faith. Was this a masterstroke of military genius or a collective suicide mission? From your perspective, it was the only option. You remember the famine from Section 14, the gnawing hunger, and you realize that death in battle is a far more dignified end than death by starvation. You pick up your rusty weapon, and you get ready to face an army 10 times your size. You are no longer a pilgrim, or a peasant, or a soldier. You are a crusader, and you are ready to fight. The day of the battle dawns, a grey, overcast day that seems to mirror the seriousness of the occasion. You are part of a small, disciplined force that marches out of the city gates of Antioch. Your new home, Kerboga's massive army is arrayed before you, a vast sea of men and horses that seems to stretch to the horizon. The sight is terrifying, but you don't break formation. You've come too far to turn back now. The battle is a chaotic, brutal affair. The Crusader army, despite its small size, is a disciplined and highly motivated force. The Saracens, on the other hand, are overconfident. They are a multi-ethnic, multi-religious army, a collection of feudal lords who have no shared purpose beyond the defeat of the Crusaders. They are not a unified force, and you can see the cracks in their ranks almost immediately. The Crusader knights, with their heavy armor and powerful charge, are like a battering ram, punching a hole in the Saracen lines. The foot soldiers, like you, follow close behind, a deadly river of steel and faith. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the complete and utter rout of Kerboga's army. The battle, which should have been a devastating defeat for the Crusaders, turns into a stunning victory. The Saracen army, for all its size, breaks and flees. The Crusader victory is complete, and the spoils of war are immense. You and your companions, who were starving just a few days ago, are now feasting on the food and wine left behind by the fleeing enemy. A curious tidbit you pick up is that some Crusaders claim to have seen St. George and other saints fighting alongside them on the battlefield, a belief that further cemented the idea that God was on their side. You don't know what you saw, but you know you're alive. The aftermath of the battle is a surreal experience. The fear and hunger are replaced by a kind of numb exhaustion. You walk among the battlefield, the bodies of men and horses scattered everywhere, and you feel a profound sense of relief. You made it, but you also feel a great sadness. So many men, who had come so far, had died just days before the miracle. You look at the bodies of the Saracens, and you feel a strange sense of empathy. They were just men, too. Historians still argue whether the Crusader victory at Antioch was a result of divine intervention, Kerboga's tactical blunders, or the Crusaders' profound morale boost. Was this a miracle, or a textbook case of a poorly led army losing to a highly motivated one? From your perspective, it was both. You remember the taste of the hardtack and the desperation from Section 14, and you realize that a full stomach and a sense of purpose are the two greatest weapons a soldier can have. You are no longer a ghost of a man, you are a survivor. The road to Jerusalem is now open, and you are ready to walk it. The victory at Antioch is a turning point, not just in the war, but in the Crusader army's very identity. You are no longer a disorganized mob of pilgrims. You are now the master of a newly conquered city, and you are a part of a new, chaotic, and completely improvised system of governance. Your leaders, men like Bohemond of Taranto and Raymond of Toulouse, are no longer just military commanders. They are now aspiring princes, vying for control of the territories you have conquered. The political maneuvering is a dizzying, frustrating affair. The grand ideal of a united army marching for God has been replaced by a feudal scramble for power. Bohemond, a shrewd and ambitious man, claims Antioch for himself, a move that angers Raymond of Toulouse, who wants to press on to Jerusalem. The two men, who had fought side by side just days ago, are now rivals. You, the foot soldier, don't care about their squabbles. You're just trying to get a decent meal and a place to sleep, but you can't escape it. The arguments and the jealousies trickle down to the rank and file, and the army is once again a house divided. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the beginning of the Crusader states. These were not a single kingdom, but a patchwork of independent principalities, each ruled by a different European lord. They were a bizarre and often unstable experiment in European feudalism transplanted to the Middle East. A curious tidbit you learn is that many of the local Christians and Muslims, who were used to a different system of rule, were completely baffled by the constant infighting and the strange customs of their new masters. They saw a new layer of bureaucracy and a new set of lords to pay taxes to. It was a new world, and not necessarily a better one. The leaders of the Crusade are now in a difficult position. The war for the Holy Land has become a war for personal power and glory. The promise of land and wealth, which had been a secondary motivator, is now a primary one. The moral high ground is gone, replaced by the muddy reality of politics. You feel a sense of disillusionment. You remember the pure faith that brought you here from Section 7 and the shared hunger from Section 14, and you realize that this new reality is a lot less glorious than the sermons had promised. Historians still argue whether the creation of the Crusader states was a necessary step to secure the gains of the First Crusade or a cynical betrayal of its original purpose. Did they need to set up these kingdoms to hold the land, or did they simply get greedy, from your perspective? It's a simple question. When do we leave for Jerusalem? The answer is not so simple. You are stuck here, a pawn in a game you don't understand, waiting for your leaders to get their act together. You're no longer fighting for God, you're just waiting for the next order. After the political drama in Antioch, the Crusader army, or what's left of it, finally begins to move again. Your destination is Jerusalem, but the road is slow and deliberate. Your leaders, now mindful of their newly won territories, have a new objective: building castles. You've seen castles back home, but the fortifications you're now building are on a completely different scale. These are not just defensive structures, they are symbols of power, control, and a long-term commitment to a new world. The work is brutal and unending. You are now a laborer, a human ant in a massive construction project. You are tasked with hauling massive stones from a nearby quarry, a back-breaking job that never seems to end. The sun beats down on you, the dust chokes you, and your muscles ache from the constant strain. You are no longer a soldier, you are a common laborer, a human wheelbarrow. The grand ideals of the pilgrimage are a distant memory, replaced by the mundane, brutal reality of hard labor. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the construction of some of the most impressive fortifications in the medieval world. The castles of the Crusader states, like the formidable Crac des Chevaliers, were built to withstand a siege for years. They were a military and engineering marvel, a testament to the Crusaders' determination to hold on to the land they had conquered. A curious tidbit you learn from a master stonemason is that the builders would often place small, personal carvings or symbols on the stones, a secret signature that no one would ever see. It's a small, human touch in a massive, impersonal project. You wonder if the guy who just broke his back carrying a stone to the wall left his mark on it. Probably not. The Crusader leaders, for all their squabbling, are united in this task. They know that without a strong defensive network, their new kingdoms are vulnerable. The castles are a lifeline, a place of refuge for the local population and a symbol of their new authority. But for you, the worker, it's just a job. You're not thinking about the long-term geopolitical significance of the fortress. You're thinking about the blister on your hand and the empty feeling in your stomach. The promise of wealth and glory has not materialized. You're still just a man, toiling in the sun, dreaming of a cool drink. Historians still argue whether the construction of these castles was a wise long-term investment or a massive drain on the Crusader states' limited resources. Did they secure their future? Or did they just create a new set of problems? From your perspective, it was a test of endurance that felt a lot like a punishment. You remember the siege of Antioch from Section 13, and you realize that building a fortress is just as difficult as taking one. You are a small cog in a massive machine, and you feel a profound sense of exhaustion. You just want to finish this job and get to Jerusalem, with the new castles taking shape. You get a small break from the brutal manual labor. You are now a part of the economic engine of the newly established Crusader states. This is a side of the Crusades you never expected. It's not just about fighting, it's about money, trade, and survival. The Crusader territories are not self-sufficient. They need to import goods from Europe and to trade with their new neighbors, both Christian and Muslim. You find yourself in a bustling market town, a place that is a bizarre mix of European and Eastern culture. The marketplace is a sensory overload. The air is thick with the smell of spices you've never smelled before: cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, mingling with the scent of roasted meat and strong Turkish coffee. The sounds are a cacophony of a dozen different languages: Latin, French, Italian, Greek, Arabic, all vying for your attention. You see merchants selling everything from silks and spices to dates and sugar. This is a new world, and it's built on a complex web of trade and commerce. You see a man from Genoa haggling with a merchant from Baghdad, and you realize that even in a time of holy war, business goes on. A mainstream historical fact you learn is that the Crusades fundamentally changed the economy of both Europe and the Middle East. They opened up new trade routes, brought new goods and technologies back to Europe, and created a new class of wealthy merchants who profited immensely from the war. The Italian city-states of Venice, Genoa, and Pisa, in particular, became incredibly wealthy by providing ships and supplies to the Crusader armies. A curious tidbit you pick up is that some Crusaders would trade their last possessions, even pieces of their armor, for a handful of spices, which were considered a great luxury and a form of wealth back home. You are no longer just a fighter, you are a consumer, a part of a global market that you never even knew existed. The political leaders, for all their religious zeal, were also savvy businessmen. They knew that their new kingdoms could not survive without a healthy economy. They established trade agreements and alliances, and they taxed the goods that passed through their territories. The Crusades were not just a holy war, they were a global business enterprise, and you are a small part of it. You feel a new sense of confusion. You remember the religious fervor that brought you here from Section 7, and you wonder how it all turned into a business. Historians still argue whether the economic motivations of the Crusades were a primary driver or a side effect of the religious fervor. Did the promise of wealth lead men to God, or did God lead men to wealth? From your perspective, it's a cynical question. You look at the wealthy merchants in their fine clothes, and you compare them to the gaunt, starving soldiers from Section 14, and you feel a new sense of resentment. You are a part of this grand adventure, but you are not profiting from it. You are just a pawn in a game that has a lot more to do with money than with God. You just want to get to Jerusalem. The long, winding road to Jerusalem continues. But now you have a new kind of company. You see them on the road. A small, weary-looking band of people who are not soldiers, not merchants, but pilgrims. They are old men and women, children, and people from all walks of life who have come to the Holy Land not to fight, but to pray. They are unarmed, and they are utterly dependent on the Crusaders for their safety. You feel a new sense of responsibility, a powerful connection to the original purpose of your journey. You walk with them for a time, and you hear their stories. They tell you of their long, difficult journey, of the dangers and the hardships they faced along the way. They tell you of their unshakable faith, of their desire to see the Holy Sepulchre with their own eyes. They are the true believers, the ones who came for God, not for gold or glory. You remember the feeling of pure faith from Section 7, and you feel a pang of nostalgia. These people are you, but from a lifetime ago. They have no idea what it's really like out here. A mainstream historical fact you are a part of is the constant flow of pilgrims to the Holy Land. Even during times of war, for centuries, Christians had been making the difficult journey to the holy sites, and the Crusades, for all their violence, did not stop them. The Crusader states provided a measure of security for these pilgrims, but the journey was still fraught with danger. A curious tidbit you learn from one of the pilgrims is that they would often stop at every small church and shrine along the way, adding hours to their journey, but believing that every step was a prayer. You see them kneeling in the dirt, their faces a mask of profound devotion, and you feel a sense of humility. The pilgrims are a reminder of what this war is supposed to be about. They are the innocent, the ones who are not tainted by the politics and the greed that have infected your army. They are a powerful symbol of the millions of people back home who are praying for your success. You feel a sense of renewed purpose, a powerful conviction that this war is not just about castles and trade, but about something much deeper and more profound. You feel a new sense of shame for the way you've come to view this journey, and you resolve to remember your original purpose. Historians still argue whether the presence of these pilgrims was a help or a hindrance to the Crusader cause. Did they provide a morale boost and a powerful symbol of faith? Or were they just a logistical burden and a liability in a world of constant war? From your perspective, they were a much-needed reminder of your purpose. You look at an old woman, her face wrinkled with age and worry, and you see a reflection of your own faith, a belief that is stronger than any sword or shield. You feel a new resolve. You will get to Jerusalem, and you will help these people get there too. As you get closer to Jerusalem, you start to see a new and powerful force emerging in the Crusader ranks. You see men dressed in simple, humble robes, but with a new kind of power and authority. They are not knights, but they are fighters. They are not priests, but they are devout. They are the military orders, and they are changing the nature of warfare in the Holy Land. You see the white robes with the red cross of the Knights Templar, and the black robes with the white cross of the Knights Hospitaller. These men are a new kind of warrior. They are monks who have taken a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But they are also trained and disciplined soldiers. They are an elite, highly effective fighting force, and they are a shock to your system. You are used to the feudal, disorganized armies of Europe, where every lord fights for himself. These men, on the other hand, are a unified, professional army, bound together by a single, powerful mission. They don't fight for land or for gold, they fight for God. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing is the rise of the first military orders. The Knights Hospitaller were initially founded to care for sick pilgrims, but they soon took up arms to defend them. The Knights Templar were founded specifically to protect pilgrims on the dangerous roads to Jerusalem. They were a revolutionary concept, a blend of military discipline and religious devotion that was completely new to the medieval world. A curious tidbit you pick up is that the Knights Templar, because of their vows of poverty, had to share a single horse between two men, a practice that became a symbol of their humility and their comradeship. You see two men on a single horse, their faces grimly determined, and you feel a new sense of respect. The military orders are a powerful reminder of the pure, unadulterated faith that brought you here. They are the embodiment of the warrior-monk ideal, a powerful blend of piety and violence. They are a stark contrast to the greedy, squabbling lords from Section 18. They don't care about politics, they care about the mission. They are a fighting force that is utterly dedicated to the Holy Land. And they are a welcome sight. Historians still argue whether the military orders were a force for good or a dangerous and fanatical force that exacerbated the violence in the Holy Land. Were they the perfect soldiers of God, or were they a new kind of holy terror? From your perspective, they are a powerful force for good. You see them defending the pilgrims from Section 21, and you feel a sense of relief. You're not fighting this war alone anymore. You have a new kind of ally, and you know they will not break. You feel a new sense of hope. You're getting closer. You can feel it. After months of walking, fighting, starving, and building, you finally arrive at the gates of Jerusalem. The sight is a religious and emotional experience unlike any you have ever known. The city is a beautiful, walled fortress, but it's more than that. It is the center of your world, the holy city, the place where Christ walked and died. You see the domes and the spires, and you feel a profound sense of awe. You've made it. You are finally here. You are not a pilgrim anymore. You are a conqueror. The siege of Jerusalem is short but brutal. The city is not as well defended as Antioch was. And the Crusader army, now unified and highly motivated, is a formidable force. The walls are breached, and the city falls. The rest is a bloody and horrifying blur. The discipline and the piety that had sustained you for so long fall away. And the army, a mob of people who have been through hell, goes on a rampage. The streets run red with blood. You are a part of a mass of humanity that is no longer fighting for God, but for vengeance. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the complete and utter slaughter of the Muslim and Jewish inhabitants of Jerusalem. The city was taken in a frenzy of religious fanaticism and a brutal settling of old scores. The number of dead is staggering. A curious tidbit you learn is that many Crusaders, after the massacre, walked barefoot to the Holy Sepulchre to pray, their hands still covered in blood. It was a bizarre, almost incomprehensible blend of piety and extreme violence. You see a man, his face a mask of grief and remorse, kneeling in the dirt, and you feel a profound sense of sickness. The conquest of Jerusalem is not the glorious victory you imagined. It is a moment of profound moral failure. The city is yours, but at what cost? You remember the pure faith of the pilgrims from Section 21 and the brave, disciplined soldiers of the military orders from Section 22, and you wonder what they would think of this. You came here for a holy purpose, and you found a bloody, horrifying reality. You feel a sense of profound disillusionment. Historians still argue whether the massacre at Jerusalem was a necessary act of war in a brutal time or a profound betrayal of Christian values. Was this a moment of glory or a stain on the history of the Crusades that can never be washed away. From your perspective, it was a moment that changed you forever. You are no longer the wide-eyed boy who left his home. You are a man who has seen the worst of what humanity can do. You have reached your destination, but you have lost your innocence. You look at the holy sites, and you feel nothing. The journey is over, and the war has just begun. The first crusade is over, and you are a survivor. The city of Jerusalem is yours, and the Crusader states are a reality. But the fighting is not done. The Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt has sent a large army to retake the city, and you are called to arms again. The final, decisive battle of the First Crusade is at a place called Ascalon. You are no longer fighting with a mob, you are a part of a disciplined army. A veteran of this long and brutal war, you are a crusader. The Battle of Ascalon is a stunning, decisive victory for the Crusaders. The Fatimid army is large, but they are no match for the highly motivated and disciplined Crusader force. The knights, the foot soldiers, and the military orders all fight as a single, unified force. The battle is short and brutal, and the victory is complete. The road to Jerusalem is now secure. A mainstream historical fact you are a part of is the final and definitive victory of the First Crusade. The victory at Ascalon secured the Crusaders' hold on the Holy Land and established the Kingdom of Jerusalem as a powerful and formidable state. The war, for the moment, is over. A curious tidbit you learn from a fellow soldier is that the victory was almost a disaster. The Crusader leaders, in their usual style, were fighting over the spoils of war even before the battle was won. It was only the sudden, overwhelming victory that prevented the army from collapsing. You see the glint of greed in the eyes of your leaders from Section 18, and you realize that some things never change. The war is over, and you are now a citizen of a new kingdom. The holy city is yours, and you are a part of a new society. The days of marching and fighting are over, for now. You feel a profound sense of relief, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that comes from having survived something that should have killed you. You look at the city of Jerusalem, the place you came so far to see, and you feel a complex mix of emotions. You are proud of what you have accomplished, but you are also ashamed of the way you accomplished it. Historians still argue whether the Crusader victory at Ascalon was a brilliant strategic move or a testament to the sheer luck and momentum of the Crusader army. Why did the Saracens flee when they had such a numerical advantage? From your perspective, it was a miracle. You are not a historian. You are a survivor. You are a man who has walked 1,000 miles, fought a dozen battles, and starved for months on end. You are a man who has seen the best and worst of humanity. The journey is over. But the story of the Crusader states is just beginning. You are a part of a new world, and you wonder what comes next. Decades pass, and you are now an old man, living out your days in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The memories of the First Crusade are a distant, half-forgotten dream, a story you tell to your children and grandchildren. The world has changed. The Crusader states are now a stable, if often threatened, reality. You have a small plot of land, a family, and a sense of peace you never thought you'd find, but the peace is a fragile one. You hear rumors of a new, powerful Muslim leader in the north, and you see a new wave of Crusaders arriving from Europe, a fresh-faced, naive army that reminds you of yourself so long ago. This is the Second Crusade, and it's a completely different kind of animal. The new Crusaders are not the desperate, disorganized mob you were a part of. They are led by two of the most powerful kings in Europe, King Louis VII of France and King Conrad III of Germany. They are a professional, well-equipped army, and they have come to the Holy Land to save the Christian kingdoms from a new threat. They are confident, arrogant, and completely unprepared for the reality of warfare in the East. They think they can simply walk in and win. You know better. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing is the profound strategic and logistical failings of the Second Crusade. The kings of Europe, for all their power and wealth, had no idea how to fight in this new world. They were used to pitched battles and honorable duels, but the Saracens were masters of a new kind of warfare, ambushes, hit-and-run tactics, and the psychological warfare of a long, drawn-out campaign. A curious tidbit you learn from a talkative old knight is that the German king's army was so undisciplined that they would often loot and pillage the very lands they were supposed to be defending, making enemies of the locals, both Christian and Muslim. You remember the shared hunger of your own campaign from Section 14 and the importance of a common purpose. And you realize that these new crusaders have neither. You see the mistakes they are making. You try to warn them, to tell them that this is not Europe, that the rules are different here, but they don't listen. They see you as a relic, an old man who has lost his nerve. They are filled with a religious fervor that is both inspiring and terrifying. They are too confident, too proud, and too full of themselves to learn from the veterans who have been living in this world for decades. They are a disaster waiting to happen. Historians still argue whether the Second Crusade's failings were a result of poor leadership, cultural arrogance, or a simple lack of understanding of the local geography and politics. Why did such a powerful army fail so completely? From your perspective, it was a lack of humility. They came here to win a holy war, but they forgot how to fight a real one. You look at them, these young, confident soldiers, and you feel a sense of profound pity. They have no idea what they are getting themselves into. The memory of the terrible thirst from Section 11, the constant dust from Section 2, and the terrifying battles from Section 10 are a distant memory for you, but they are about to become a harsh reality for them. The failures of the Second Crusade are a slow-motion disaster, and you watch them unfold with a grim sense of inevitability. The catalyst for this new wave of holy war, you recall, was a profound and devastating event that happened years before, the fall of Edessa. Edessa was the first of the Crusader states, a buffer kingdom that was a bulwark against the rising power of the Turks. Its fall was a shock to the Christian world, a wake-up call that the Crusader presence in the Holy Land was not a permanent fixture. You hear the stories of the fall of the city, the new Muslim leader, a man named Zengi, a brilliant and brutal commander, had taken the city by force. The defenders, for all their bravery, were no match for his disciplined army. The loss of Edessa was not just a military defeat, it was a psychological one. It shattered the myth of Crusader invincibility and sent a wave of panic throughout the Christian world. It was a sign that the Crusader states were vulnerable, that they could be retaken, that all the sacrifices of the First Crusade from Section 24 could be undone. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the profound impact of the fall of Edessa on the course of the Crusades. It was the event that inspired the Pope to call for a new holy war, a new wave of crusaders to come to the rescue of the beleaguered Christian kingdoms. It was a call to arms that brought kings and emperors to the Holy Land, a grand theatrical show of force. A curious tidbit you learn from a merchant is that the news of Edessa's fall took months to reach Europe, travelling by ship and by courier, a testament to the slow pace of news in the medieval world. By the time the kings arrived, the situation on the ground had already changed, and they were fighting a war that had already moved on. You remember the political squabbles from Section 18, and you see the same patterns repeating themselves. The Crusader lords in the Holy Land, a world-weary and cynical bunch, were too busy fighting among themselves to mount a proper defence. The new wave of Crusaders from Europe, for all their power and numbers, were a clumsy, disorganized force. They were not united by a single purpose, but by a tangle of rivalries and conflicting interests. It was a recipe for disaster. Historians still argue whether the fall of Edessa was a simple military defeat or a sign of a deeper, more profound weakness in the Crusader states. Was this an isolated incident or a symptom of a larger problem? From your perspective, it was the death knell of the illusion of security. You have lived in this world for decades, and you know that peace is a temporary state, and that war is a constant. The fall of Edessa was a wake-up call, but it was a warning that the new Crusaders were too arrogant to heed. You watch them march past your small farm, their banners waving in the wind, and you feel a deep sense of foreboding. The end is coming. The call for the Second Crusade was not just a papal bull, it was a powerful, moving sermon delivered by one of the most famous men in Europe, Bernard of Clairvaux. He was a brilliant orator, a powerful religious figure who could sway thousands with his words. You are living in the Holy Land, but you hear the stories of his fiery sermons, of his promise of salvation for all who took up the cross. His words were a powerful force, and they had a profound effect on the young men who joined the new crusade. Bernard's message was simple and powerful. Take up the cross, and your sins will be forgiven. He did not mince words. He spoke of the fall of Edessa from section 26 as a divine test, a call to arms for all of Christendom. He promised a place in heaven for all who died in the Holy Land, a promise that resonated with the hearts of a deeply religious society. You hear the new Crusaders talking about his sermons, their faces a mask of profound devotion, and you feel a strange sense of familiarity. This is the same religious fervour that brought you here so long ago from section 7. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound influence of Bernard of Clairvaux on the Second Crusade. He was the spiritual engine of the movement, the man who gave it its moral authority and its emotional resonance. His words were so powerful that they even inspired women and children to take up the cross. A phenomenon that you find both inspiring and terrifying. A curious tidbit you learn is that Bernard was so popular that people would tear off pieces of his clothes to keep as a relic. A testament to his almost rock star status in the medieval world. The problem, you realize, is that he was a religious leader, not a military one. He was a man of words, not of war. He did not understand the logistical nightmare of moving a massive army across a continent, nor the complexities of warfare in the East. He promised a divine victory, but he gave no strategic advice. He gave them a reason to fight, but he gave them no way to win. You feel a new sense of pity for these young men. They have come to the Holy Land for a holy purpose, but they have no idea how to accomplish it. Historians still argue whether Bernard of Clairvaux was a hero who inspired a generation of devout men or a naive spiritual leader who sent them to their deaths. Was his influence a blessing or a curse? From your perspective, it was a powerful and dangerous thing. He gave these men a powerful reason to fight, but he did not give them the tools to survive. You remember the terrible battles from section 10 and the grinding starvation from section 14, and you realize that a powerful sermon is no substitute for a full belly and a good shield. You watch the new Crusaders march past, their eyes filled with a fanatical zeal, and you feel a deep sense of unease. They are a wave of faith, but they are a wave that is about to crash against a very hard shore. The new Crusaders, led by two of the most powerful kings in Europe, are now on the march. You watch them from your farm in the Holy Land, a world away from the dust and the heat of their journey, but you hear the stories, and you see the profound difference in their approach. This is not the long, arduous trek you made with your fellow pilgrims from section 2. This is a grand, well-funded expedition, but it is a logistical and political nightmare. The kings of Europe, in their arrogance, have chosen a new route. Instead of taking the coastal road, they have decided to march through the harsh, mountainous terrain of Anatolia, a land that you know is a meat grinder for any army. They are not a unified force. The French and German armies are a mix of rivals and competitors, and their leaders are constantly at odds. The German king, Conrad, is a proud and stubborn man, and he refuses to take advice from anyone. He believes that his royal army is invincible, and he will not deviate from his chosen path. The French king, Louis, is more cautious, but he is also indecisive. The result is a slow, grinding, and utterly disastrous march. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound logistical failings of the Second Crusade. The kings were unable to properly supply their massive armies, and they soon ran out of food and water. The Turks, masters of guerrilla warfare, were constantly ambushing them, picking off small groups of men and horses. The European armies, used to open-field battles, were completely helpless. A curious tidbit you learn from a traveller is that the German army was so poorly organised that they had to throw away their heavy armour and weapons just to keep moving, a sign of their profound failure. You remember the importance of your own simple gear from section 8, and you realise that all their wealth and all their finery were no match for the brutal reality of the road. You feel a profound sense of sadness. These young men have come so far, full of a holy zeal from Bernard of Clairvaux's sermons from section 27, only to be broken by the same terrain that almost broke you. They are not fighting a war, they are fighting a landscape. And they are losing. The army is slowly disintegrating. And the grand, glorious expedition is becoming a humiliating retreat. Historians still argue whether the Second Crusade's failure was a result of the king's profound arrogance or a simple lack of understanding of the local landscape and the enemy. Was this a tactical blunder or a cultural one? From your perspective, it was a tragedy. They came here to save the Holy Land, but they couldn't even save themselves. You watch the remnants of the once proud armies trickle into the Holy Land, a defeated and demoralized force, and you feel a profound sense of pity. They have failed. and they have no one to blame but themselves. The road ahead is not a road to glory, but a road to humiliation. The new Crusaders, the survivors of the long, grinding march from Section 28, finally arrive in the Holy Land. They are a shadow of their former selves, but they are here. The kings, humiliated by their failure on the road, are now in a new world, a world where you, the veteran, are a respected figure. They come to you for advice. They ask you what to do next. You tell them the truth. They should attack Damascus. It's a powerful and wealthy city, a key to the Muslim control of the region, and it's a logical target. They don't listen. The kings of Europe, along with the local Crusader lords, decide to attack Damascus, a city that has, until now, been a fragile ally of the Crusader states. The decision is a complete and utter blunder. The local lords of the Holy Land, who have been living in this world for decades, know that Damascus is a complex and difficult target. It is a powerful city with strong walls and a well-trained army. They know that a direct assault is likely to fail. But the new Crusaders, full of their own pride and arrogance, insist on a direct assault. They believe that their faith and their numbers will win the day. A mainstream historical fact you are a part of is the profound failure of the siege of Damascus. The Crusader army, for all its size, is a disorganized and undisciplined force. The Saracens, on the other hand, are united and highly motivated. They know their city, and they know the weaknesses of their enemy. The siege is a grinding, frustrating affair. The Crusader army is constantly ambushed, and their supply lines are cut. They are losing the will to fight. A curious tidbit you learn from a soldier who fought in the siege is that the Crusader army was so disorganized that they had to rely on a handful of local traitors to guide them to a weak point in the city's walls. A plan that quickly went awry. The siege is a complete and utter disaster. After just a few weeks, the Crusader army is forced to retreat, their mission a complete and total failure. The kings of Europe, humiliated and defeated, pack up their remaining forces and return home. The Second Crusade, which had been launched with such fanfare and such hope, ends in a complete and total humiliation. You feel a profound sense of sadness and frustration. You warned them. You told them that this was a different kind of war, but they didn't listen. Historians still argue whether the failure of the siege of Damascus was a result of poor leadership, a lack of intelligence, or a simple betrayal by the local Crusader lords, who feared that a victory at Damascus would lead to a loss of their own power. Was this a political failure or a military one? From your perspective, it was a profound human failure. They came here with a grand, holy purpose. But they let their pride and their arrogance get in the way. You remember the unity of your own army from Section 10 and the feeling of shared purpose. And you realize that a large army with no common goal is just a mob. The Second Crusade is over, and the Holy Land is now more vulnerable than ever. You feel a deep sense of foreboding. The end is coming, the Second Crusade is over, and you are back on your farm, a world-weary old man who has seen too much. The new Crusaders, humbled and defeated, have returned to Europe. The political landscape of the Holy Land is more unstable than ever. The Crusader states are a fragile, fractured mess, and the local lords are back to their old, squabbling ways from Section 18. But something else has changed. The relationship between the Crusaders and their Byzantine allies has completely broken down. The Byzantines, who had been a source of suspicion and distrust since the First Crusade, are now seen as a complete and utter enemy. The Crusaders accuse them of a litany of betrayals, of failing to provide supplies, of secretly negotiating with the Turks, of actively hindering the Crusader armies. The Byzantines, for their part, see the Crusaders as an unruly, dangerous, and completely unreliable force that has brought nothing but chaos and destruction to their lands. The mutual animosity is a new and dangerous reality. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the complete breakdown of the Byzantine Crusader alliance. The Second Crusade was the final nail in the coffin. The Byzantines had good reasons to be wary. They saw the Crusaders as a threat to their own power, and they had no desire to help them establish powerful kingdoms on their borders. The Crusaders, for their part, were a crude and unsophisticated people who had no respect for the ancient and complex Byzantine culture. A curious tidbit you hear from a merchant is that the Crusaders would often use the Byzantine emperor's name as a curse word, a testament to the level of animosity between the two sides. The grand, united front of Christendom is a complete and utter lie. The Crusader states are now on their own, surrounded by enemies, with no allies to turn to. The political landscape of the Holy Land is more dangerous than ever. The Turks, who had been a fragmented and disorganized enemy, are now a unified and powerful force. The Crusaders, who had once been a disciplined army, are now a group of petty, squabbling feudal lords. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine Crusader mistrust was a result of a fundamental cultural clash or a series of political blunders that led to a complete breakdown of the alliance. Was this an inevitable outcome, or a tragedy that could have been avoided? From your perspective, it was a self-inflicted wound. The Crusaders, in their arrogance and their greed, alienated the one ally who could have helped them survive. You remember the dust and the heat of the Long March from Section 2 and the kindness of the Armenians from Section 12. And you realize that the Crusaders had a chance to build a better world, but they threw it all away. You feel a deep sense of despair. The end is coming. The Second Crusade is over, and the Holy Land is now more vulnerable than ever. The Crusader states are a series of small, isolated islands in a vast sea of hostile neighbors, but the greatest threat to their existence is not an army, but a man. His name is Saladin, and you start to hear whispers of his rise to power. At first, he is just a name, a distant rumor, but as the years pass, the rumors become a reality. He is a brilliant military commander, a shrewd political operator, and a man who is destined to change the course of history. Saladin is a different kind of enemy. He is not just a warlord or a bandit chief. He is a leader who is able to unite the fractured Muslim world under a single, powerful banner. He is a master of propaganda, a man who is able to inspire his people with a powerful religious fervor that is a mirror image of the Crusaders' own. He is a man who is able to win the hearts and minds of his people, and he is a man who is utterly dedicated to a single, powerful mission, the destruction of the Crusader states and the reclamation of Jerusalem. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the rise of Saladin and the unification of the Muslim world. For decades, the Crusader states had benefited from the disunity of their enemies. But Saladin changed all that. He was a leader who was able to put aside old rivalries and forge a powerful, unified front. He was a political and military genius who was able to outmaneuver the Crusader lords at every turn. A curious tidbit you hear from a traveler is that Saladin was known for his generosity and his piety, a fact that made him a beloved figure among his own people and even earned him the grudging respect of his enemies. He was not just a great warrior, he was a great man. You feel a sense of profound fear. The Crusader states are a house divided, led by squabbling and incompetent lords from Section 18. Saladin, on the other hand, is a single, powerful, and utterly ruthless force. You remember the terrible battles of the First Crusade from Section 10, the unity of your army from Section 17, and you realize that you were a part of something that these new Crusaders have lost. You watch the local Crusader lords fighting among themselves, and you realize that they have no idea what is coming. They are playing a game of petty politics, and Saladin is playing a game of war. Historians still argue whether Saladin was a just and merciful leader or a ruthless and opportunistic tyrant. Was he a true hero of the Muslim world, or a clever and ambitious man who used religion to gain power? From your perspective, he is the end of the line. He is the man who is destined to destroy everything you and your fellow Crusaders have built. You feel a deep sense of resignation. The end is coming. The rise of Saladin is a slow, methodical process, but you feel his presence in the air. The local Crusader lords, a fractious and often incompetent bunch, are no match for his political and military genius. They are a caricature of the noble warriors they once were. They are now petty tyrants, more interested in their own power and their own squabbles than in the survival of their kingdoms. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the most important of the Crusader states, is in a state of profound political decay. You hear the stories of the kings and queens of Jerusalem, a sad and pathetic lot. They are constantly fighting among themselves, and they are making a series of catastrophic blunders. The most egregious of these is the disastrous leadership of the last king, a man who is no match for Saladin. The local lords are divided by old rivalries and new jealousies. They are a house divided, and Saladin is a patient man who knows how to exploit their weaknesses. He is a patient predator, and they are a flock of bickering sheep. A mainstream historical fact you are living through is the profound political weakness of the Crusader states in the face of a unified enemy. The Crusader kingdoms were, at their core, a series of independent fiefdoms, and they had no central authority to unite them. They were constantly fighting among themselves, and they were unable to mount a proper defense against a unified enemy. A curious tidbit you learn from a soldier is that some of the Crusader lords would even hire Muslim mercenaries to fight their battles, a testament to the level of internal division and a slap in the face of the holy cause. You remember the religious fervour that brought you here from Section 7, and you feel a profound sense of disgust. You see the writing on the wall. The end is coming. The Crusader lords are no match for Saladin. They are a collection of petty, squabbling men, and he is a powerful, unified force. They are not fighting for God anymore. They are fighting for themselves. You feel a deep sense of shame for what this place has become. The promise of the First Crusade has been squandered, and the sacrifices of so many men have been for nothing. Historians still argue whether the fall of the Crusader states was a result of their own internal weaknesses, or a simple matter of a powerful enemy rising to power. Did they fail because of their own incompetence, or were they simply a small, isolated group in a vast sea of hostile neighbours? From your perspective, it was a self-inflicted wound. They had a chance to build a new world, a new kingdom, but they let their pride and their greed get in the way. You remember the simple, shared purpose that brought you here so long ago, and you realize that they have lost it. The end is coming. The end is no longer a whisper, it is a roar. Saladin, the brilliant and ruthless leader you heard about from Section 31, has finally made his move. The Crusader army, a pathetic and disorganized force, has marched to face him. The battleground is a place called the Horns of Hattin, and it will be a day of utter and complete disaster. You are not fighting in this battle. You are too old for that now, but you hear the stories, and they are a living nightmare. The battle is a tactical blunder of a scale you have never seen. The Crusader army, under the command of a series of incompetent and arrogant leaders, is lured into a trap. They are led into a waterless, desolate terrain, where the heat and the thirst are a constant, agonizing threat. You remember the terrible thirst of your own journey from Section 11, and you feel a profound sense of foreboding. These men, these arrogant and foolish young men, have walked into a trap they will never escape from. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound and utter defeat of the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin. The army, exhausted by the heat and the thirst, is surrounded and annihilated by Saladin's unified and disciplined force. The knights, with their heavy armour from Section 8, are no match for the fast and agile Saracen cavalry. The foot soldiers, like you, are a helpless, disorganized mess. The battle is not a contest, it is a slaughter. A curious tidbit you hear from a survivor is that the Crusader soldiers, in their desperation, would throw away their weapons and armour just to escape. A final and pathetic sign of their complete defeat. The battle is a complete and utter disaster. The Crusader army is destroyed. The leadership of the Crusader states is captured or killed. The kingdom of Jerusalem, which you and your fellow Crusaders had bled and died for, is now utterly defenceless. You feel a profound sense of sadness and resignation. The end is no longer coming, it is here. You remember the proud and arrogant kings of the Second Crusade from Section 25, and you realize that they have failed. They have lost it all. Historians still argue whether the defeat at Hattin was a result of a profound strategic blunder by the Crusader leaders or a simple matter of a superior military force winning the day. Was this a failure of leadership or a simple inevitability? From your perspective, it was a moment of profound cosmic justice. The Crusaders, in their arrogance and their pride, had forgotten the things that had made them victorious in the first place, a shared purpose, a common goal, and a deep, unshakable faith. They had lost it all, and they had no one to blame but themselves. You feel a deep sense of despair. The end is here. The Battle of Hattin is not just a military defeat, it is a spiritual one. The Crusaders lost more than just an army on that day. They lost a symbol. They lost the true cross, the very cross on which Christ was crucified, a relic that they had brought to the battle as a banner of faith. You hear the stories of its capture, of how it was paraded through the streets of Damascus as a trophy, a sign of the ultimate triumph of the Muslim world. The loss is a profound, soul-crushing blow. The true cross was not just a piece of wood, it was a symbol of everything the Crusades stood for. It was a sign of God's favor, a banner of victory, a source of profound spiritual strength. Its loss is a devastating blow to the morale of the Christian kingdoms. It is a sign that God has abandoned them, that their cause is no longer a just one. You remember the power of the Holy Lance from section 15, the way it had transformed a starving, defeated army into a unified, zealous force. Now, that power is gone. The spiritual armor that had protected you for so long is gone. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound symbolic significance of the loss of the true cross for the Crusaders. It was a moment of profound spiritual crisis for Saladin. It was a moment of ultimate triumph, a sign that God was on his side. He had not just won a battle, he had won a holy war. A curious tidbit you hear from a traveler is that some Crusaders claimed that the true cross was not really lost. They claimed that it had been replaced with a fake one, a final, desperate act of self-deception in the face of a profound and devastating defeat. You feel a profound sense of despair. The Crusaders had sacrificed so much for this holy cause, and now it all seems to have been for nothing. You remember the pure faith of the pilgrims from section 21 and the brave, disciplined soldiers of the military orders from section 22, and you wonder what they would think of this. The Crusader states are now a hollow shell, a monument to a cause that has failed. The end is here. Historians still argue whether the loss of the true cross was a greater blow to the Crusader cause than the military defeat at Hattin. Did the loss of a symbol have more of an impact than the loss of an army? From your perspective, it was a 1-2 punch that knocked the Crusaders out for good. They had lost their physical strength, and now they had lost their spiritual one. You remember the power of a single idea, and you realize that a symbol can be a far more powerful weapon than any sword or shield. The end is here. The end is no longer a matter of debate. It is a simple, brutal reality. The Crusader army is destroyed, the true cross is lost, and the gates of Jerusalem are now open to Saladin. You are in the city, an old man who has seen a lifetime of war and peace, and you are waiting for the inevitable. The city is a scene of profound panic and chaos. The people are running through the streets, their faces a mask of fear and despair. They know what is coming. They know that this is the end of the Crusader dream, but something unexpected happens. Saladin, the man who you expected to be a ruthless and brutal conqueror, proves to be a man of profound mercy and grace. He does not order a massacre. He does not take vengeance for the slaughter of 1099 from section 23. Instead, he offers the people of Jerusalem a chance to leave. He offers them a peaceful surrender. He offers them their lives. A mainstream historical fact you are a part of is the peaceful and merciful surrender of Jerusalem. Saladin, a man of profound honor and piety, offered a surrender that was a world away from the brutal, bloody conquest of the First Crusade. He allowed the Christian population to leave the city, to buy their freedom, and to take their possessions with them. It was a moment of profound mercy, a testament to the man's character and his commitment to his own faith. A curious tidbit you hear from a local is that Saladin's own brother, a man of immense wealth, would often use his own money to buy the freedom of the poor, a testament to the generosity of the Muslim leadership. You feel a profound sense of relief and a new sense of humility. The Crusaders, in their arrogance and their pride, had lost everything. Saladin, in his mercy and his grace, had won it all. He had not just won a city, he had won the moral high ground. He had shown the world that there was a different way to fight a holy war, a way that was not based on vengeance and bloodshed. You remember the brutal, bloody conquest of Jerusalem so long ago, and you feel a profound sense of shame. You came here to fight for God, and you found a bloody, horrifying reality. Saladin, on the other hand, came here to fight for God, and he found a way to be a man of grace. Historians still argue whether Saladin's mercy was a result of his profound piety or a clever political move to show the world that the Muslim world was a more civilized and humane place than the Christian one. Was this an act of grace or an act of political genius? From your perspective, it was a moment of profound relief. You are alive, you are free. The Crusader dream is over, but you are a survivor. You feel a deep sense of peace. The war is over, the journey is over, the Crusader states are no more. The news of the fall of Jerusalem travels across the seas, a shockwave that reverberates throughout Europe. The Pope, a powerful and ambitious man, calls for a new crusade, a third crusade, to retake the Holy City. This is a different kind of crusade. It is not a popular, grassroots movement like the first. It is a grand, theatrical show of force, a crusade of kings, the most powerful men in Europe, the kings of England, France, and Germany, have taken up the cross. You are an old man now, living out your days in a small coastal town, a refugee from the fall of Jerusalem. You watch the ships arrive, and you see the new crusaders. They are not the weary, defeated men of the Second Crusade from Section 25. They are a professional, well-equipped, and highly motivated force. They are led by three of the most powerful and famous men in the world. This is not a pilgrimage. This is a military expedition on a scale you have never seen. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing is the beginning of the Third Crusade. It was a massive and expensive undertaking, a show of force that was meant to show the world that Europe was still a power to be reckoned with. The kings brought with them vast armies, a huge navy, and an immense amount of wealth. A curious tidbit you learn from a sailor is that the ships were so heavily laden with men and supplies that they almost sank in a storm, a testament to the sheer size of the operation. You remember the long, grueling march of the First Crusade from Section 2, and you feel a new sense of awe. This is a different world. The kings, however, are not a unified force. The King of Germany, Frederick Barbarossa, a proud and stubborn man, has his own plans. The King of France, Philip Augustus, is a shrewd and ambitious political operator. The King of England, Richard the Lionheart, is a brilliant and charismatic military commander. They are a mix of rivals and competitors, and their personal feuds and jealousies are a constant source of tension. You remember the internal political struggles of your own army from Section 18, and you feel a new sense of foreboding. These men may have vast armies and immense wealth, but they have no shared purpose. Historians still argue whether the Third Crusade was a brilliant military campaign or a political failure. Did the king's personal rivalries lead to the failure of the crusade, or was it a simple matter of a powerful enemy? From your perspective, it was a powerful reminder that history repeats itself. They are making all the same mistakes you made so long ago. You watch the ships sail away, their banners waving in the wind, and you feel a deep sense of unease. They are a powerful force, but they are a force that is about to clash with a much more powerful man. The Third Crusade, for all its power and its scale, is a series of fits and starts. The German king, Frederick Barbarossa, drowns in a river, a bizarre and pathetic end to a great king. The French king, Philip Augustus, a shrewd and cautious man, is more interested in his own political gains than in the Holy War. But one man, stands out. His name is Richard, and he is a force of nature. He is Richard the Lionheart, and he is a hero from the songs and stories of your youth, a man of immense courage and charisma. You are living in the Holy Land, a world-weary old man, and you see him. He is not a polished, theatrical king. He is a soldier. He is a man who loves a good fight, and he is a man who is utterly dedicated to a single, powerful mission, the defeat of Saladin. You watch him in battle, and you are stunned. He is a brilliant military commander, a master of strategy, and a man who is able to inspire his men with a single glance. He is a man who is destined to change the course of history. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing is the profound impact of Richard the Lionheart on the Third Crusade. He was the heart and soul of the movement, the man who gave it its energy and its purpose. He was a master of logistics and a brilliant tactician, a man who was able to win battles that should have been lost. A curious tidbit you hear from a soldier is that Richard was so strong that he could split a man's head open with a single blow from his sword. You watch him in action, and you believe it. Richard, however, is not a simple man. He is a complex, arrogant, and often brutal man. He is a man who is more interested in personal glory than in the holy cause. He is a man who is willing to take risks, and a man who is willing to make enemies. He is a man who is both a hero and a tyrant, a man who is both a saviour and a threat. You remember the unity of your own army from Section 17 and the importance of a common purpose, and you realise that Richard is a single, powerful force, but he is a force that is not always working for the common good. Historians still argue whether Richard the Lionheart was a brilliant military commander who could have won the war if he had not been betrayed by his allies, or a flawed and arrogant man who let his own pride get in the way of a victory. Was he a hero or a villain? From your perspective, he is a man who is a reflection of the Crusades themselves, a powerful blend of piety and violence, of courage and brutality. He is the last of the great Crusader heroes, a man who is destined to fight a war he can't possibly win. You watch him ride past, and you feel a sense of awe and a sense of pity. The Third Crusade is now focused on a single objective, the city of Acre. It's a key port city, and it's a vital strategic target. The siege of Acre is a long, grinding, and utterly miserable affair. It lasts for 2 years, a testament to the profound determination of both sides. You are not fighting in this battle, you are too old for that now, but you hear the stories, and they are a living nightmare. The siege is a microcosm of the entire war. It is a world of constant fighting, of disease, and of profound boredom. The Crusader army is a series of independent forces, each led by its own lord from Section 18. The French king, Philip Augustus, is there, a shrewd and cautious man who is more interested in his own political gains than in the Holy War. But the real force is Richard the Lionheart from Section 37, a man who is utterly dedicated to a single, powerful mission, the defeat of Saladin. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the sheer scale and brutality of the siege of Acre. It was a test of endurance that broke the will of many men. The Crusader army was constantly fighting a two-front war, a war against the city's defenders and a war against Saladin's massive army from Section 31, which was constantly harassing them from the rear. A curious tidbit you hear from a soldier is that the Crusader soldiers would often send dead bodies into the city with catapults, a bizarre and gruesome form of biological warfare. You remember the terrible battles of the First Crusade from Section 10, and you realize that some things never change. The siege is a complete and utter mess. The Crusader army is suffering from disease and starvation, and the leaders are constantly bickering. But Richard is a force of nature. He is a man who is able to inspire his men with a single glance, a man who is able to win battles that should have been lost. He is the heart and soul of the Crusade, and he is a man who is destined to change the course of history. Historians still argue whether the siege of Acre was a brilliant strategic move or a colossal waste of time and resources. Did it secure a vital port city? Or did it just bleed the Crusader army dry? From your perspective, it was a moment of profound courage and profound brutality. It was a test of endurance that showed the world what the Crusaders were capable of, for better or for worse. You remember the long, grinding siege of Antioch from Section 13, and you realize that some things never change. The war is a cycle of hope and despair, of victory and defeat, and it's a cycle that seems to be endless. The siege of Acre, for all its brutality and its length, is finally over. The city falls, a massive victory for the Crusaders, but just as the victory is secured, a new and familiar problem emerges. The French king, Philip Augustus, a shrewd and ambitious political operator, announces that he is leaving. He has had enough of the war, and he is more interested in his own political gains back home. His departure is a profound blow to the morale of the Crusader army. You are a world-weary old man living in the Holy Land, and you feel a profound sense of resignation. You remember the political squabbles of the First Crusade from Section 18, and you realize that some things never change. The kings of Europe, for all their power and their wealth, are still a group of petty, squabbling men. They are not here for God, they are here for themselves. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing is the profound political friction that plagued the Third Crusade. The kings of Europe were not a unified force. They were a group of rivals and competitors who were more interested in their own power than in the holy cause. Philip Augustus, in particular, was a shrewd political operator who saw the Crusade as an opportunity to weaken his rival. Richard the Lionheart from Section 37. A curious tidbit you hear is that Philip Augustus's own men were so disgusted by his departure that some of them secretly stayed behind to fight with Richard, a testament to the personal loyalty that Richard inspired. The departure of Philip Augustus is a major turning point. The Crusader army is now a much smaller and a much more vulnerable force. Richard the Lionheart, a man of immense courage and charisma, is now the sole leader of the crusade. He is now on his own, surrounded by enemies and betrayed by his allies. You feel a new sense of pity for him. He is a hero in a world that has no place for heroes. Historians still argue whether the departure of Philip Augustus was a decisive blow to the Third Crusade. Could the Crusaders have retaken Jerusalem if he had stayed, or was his departure a blessing in disguise, a way to get rid of a political liability? From your perspective, it was a sad and predictable end to a grand, theatrical show of force. The kings of Europe had come here for a holy purpose, but they had let their own pride and their own greed get in the way. You remember the unity of your own army so long ago, and you realize that they have lost it all. The end is coming, with the French king gone. The Third Crusade is now the Richard the Lionheart show. He is the sole commander, and he is a force of nature. He has a single, powerful mission to defeat Saladin. The two men, two of the most brilliant military minds of the medieval world, are destined to clash. The battleground is a place called Arsuf, and it is a battle that will change the course of history. You are not fighting in this battle. You are too old for that now. But you hear the stories, and they are a living legend. The Battle of Arsuf is a tactical masterpiece. Saladin's massive army from Section 31 is constantly harassing the Crusader army, trying to break their lines. But Richard is a master of discipline and a master of strategy. He has his men march in a tight, disciplined formation, and he refuses to be provoked. He is a patient man, and he is waiting for his moment. When Saladin's army finally overextends itself, Richard unleashes his knights in a devastating charge. The charge is a complete and utter surprise, a shock to the system of the Saracen army. The battle is a complete and utter rout. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound military genius of Richard the Lionheart. He was a master of logistics and a brilliant tactician, a man who was able to win battles that should have been lost. He was a man who understood the value of discipline and the power of a single, decisive charge. A curious tidbit you hear from a soldier is that Richard himself fought in the front lines, a man of immense courage and a man who was willing to get his hands dirty. You remember the arrogant, effeminate kings of the Second Crusade from Section 25, and you feel a new sense of respect. Richard is a king who is a man of the people, a man who is willing to fight alongside his men. The victory at Arsuf is a stunning and decisive victory for the Crusaders. It shatters the myth of Saladin's invincibility, and it shows the world that the Crusaders are still a force to be reckoned with. The road to Jerusalem is now open. You feel a new sense of hope. You are an old man, and you have seen so much failure, so much despair, so much betrayal. But now, for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of hope. Historians still argue whether the Battle of Arsuf was Richard's greatest military achievement or a simple matter of a disciplined army defeating a disorganized one. Was this a moment of profound genius or a simple victory? From your perspective, it was a moment of profound courage. You remember the defeat at Hattin from Section 33, and you realize that Richard has avenged the fallen. He has restored the honor of the Crusader cause, and he has given you a new reason to believe the war is not over. But for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of hope. The road to Jerusalem is now open. The victory at Arsuf is a stunning one, but it does not lead to a final victory. The war between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin is now a stalemate. A contest between two great men who are both too strong to lose and too exhausted to win. The two men, the Christian king and the Muslim leader from Section 31, are now engaged in a different kind of war, a war of diplomacy. The two men, who are bitter enemies, have a profound and unexpected respect for each other. You hear the stories of their negotiations. The two men, through a series of intermediaries, exchange letters and gifts. They are both shrewd political operators, and they know that a final and decisive victory is not possible. They are both tired of the war, and they are both looking for a way out. They are both men of honor, and they are both men who are willing to do what is necessary to end the bloodshed. It's a strange and beautiful thing to see. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound and unexpected relationship between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. The two men, who are bitter enemies, have a profound respect for each other's courage and their skill. They are a mirror image of each other, a Christian king and a Muslim leader who are both men of immense courage and immense pride. A curious tidbit you hear from a traveller is that the two men once exchanged gifts. Richard, for example, sent Saladin a falcon, a gift that was a testament to his respect for the man. Saladin, in turn, sent Richard a gift of snow and fresh fruit during a fever. It was a bizarre and beautiful display of respect in a world of profound hatred. The peace talks, however, are a complex and difficult affair. The Crusader lords, a fractious and often incompetent bunch from Section 32, are constantly bickering. They want a final, decisive victory, but they are not willing to pay the price. They are a group of men who are a liability to their own cause. Richard, a man of immense courage and immense pride, is a man who is willing to make a compromise. He is a man who is willing to end the war, even if it means not retaking Jerusalem. Historians still argue whether Richard's decision to negotiate with Saladin was a wise and pragmatic one, or a profound betrayal of the Crusader cause. Did he do the right thing, or did he give up too easily? From your perspective, he was a man who understood the reality of the situation. He knew that a final, decisive victory was not possible. And he was a man who was willing to make a compromise for the good of his people. You remember the brutal, bloody conquest of Jerusalem from Section 23, and you realize that a peaceful compromise is a far more noble end. The war is over, the journey is over, the Crusader states are now a fragile, but peaceful reality. The Third Crusade ends not with a final victory, but with a truce. Richard the Lionheart, a man of immense courage and immense pride, signs a peace treaty with Saladin. He has not retaken Jerusalem, but he has secured a fragile peace and a number of coastal cities. He returns to Europe, a hero who is not a conqueror, but a peacemaker. The Crusader states are now a fragile reality, a small, isolated group of Christian kingdoms in a vast sea of Muslim power. But the Crusades are not over, a new and far more bizarre chapter is about to begin. This is the Fourth Crusade, and it's a complete and utter disaster. It is not a crusade of kings, it is a crusade of ambitious and ruthless men who are more interested in wealth and power than in the holy cause. The crusade is launched with the intention of retaking the Holy Land, but it is quickly diverted. The Crusaders, a greedy and disorganized mob, are convinced to attack Constantinople, the ancient and wealthy capital of the Byzantine Empire. The city is a marvel, a place of immense wealth and power, but it is also a rival. The Crusaders, in their arrogance and their greed, see an opportunity for immense wealth and power. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing is the profound betrayal of the Fourth Crusade. The Crusaders, who had come here to fight for God, instead turned on their Christian brothers. They besieged and sacked Constantinople, a city that was a center of Christian power for 1,000 years. The city is a scene of profound chaos and destruction. The Crusaders pillage the city, they steal its treasures, and they desecrate its holy sites. The betrayal is a profound and soul-crushing blow to the idea of a united Christendom. A curious tidbit you hear from a sailor is that the Crusaders, in their arrogance, would even melt down the ancient bronze statues to use the metal for their coins, a testament to their profound lack of respect for the ancient culture. The Fourth Crusade is a complete and utter disaster. It does not go to the Holy Land. It does not retake Jerusalem. It does not accomplish a single one of its original goals. It is a crusade of profound betrayal and profound greed. You remember the unity of your own army from Section 17, the sacrifices of so many men, and you feel a profound sense of shame. They have taken the name of the Crusades and they have used it for their own personal gain. Historians still argue whether the diversion of the Fourth Crusade was a result of a series of political blunders or a cynical, pre-planned act of betrayal. Was this a mistake or a profound act of greed? From your perspective, it was a stain on the history of the Crusades that can never be washed away. The Crusades, which had started with such pure and pious intentions, had now become a symbol of greed, of betrayal, and of profound hypocrisy. You feel a deep sense of despair. The end is coming, the Fourth Crusade is over, and the Crusader cause is now a parody of its former self. But a new, and far more heartbreaking, chapter is about to begin. This is the Children's Crusade, and it is a testament to the profound power of faith and the profound naivete of a generation. The Crusade is not a military expedition, it is a pilgrimage, it is a movement of children, of young boys and girls who have taken up the cross, believing that their innocence and their purity will win a war that has been lost for generations. You hear the stories of these children, these thousands of young boys and girls who have left their homes and their families and have started to march to the Holy Land. They are led by a young boy, a charismatic and pious leader who claims to have a vision from God. They are not a military force. They are a wave of faith. They are a profound and heartbreaking symbol of the idea that the holy war can be won with faith alone. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the profound and tragic story of the Children's Crusade. The children, for all their piety and their faith, are completely unprepared for the brutal reality of the road. They die of starvation and disease from Section 5. They are sold into slavery. They are a heartbreaking testament to the profound naivete of a generation. A curious tidbit you hear from a traveller is that some of the children believed that the seas would part for them, a testament to their profound faith and their profound ignorance of the reality of the world. The Children's Crusade is a complete and utter disaster. It does not reach the Holy Land. It does not accomplish a single one of its goals. It is a testament to the profound and tragic story of a generation that was betrayed by a false prophet and a false hope. You remember the raw, unadulterated faith of the pilgrims of the First Crusade from Section 21, and you feel a profound sense of sadness. They were a part of a holy cause, but they were not a part of a military one. They were a part of a pilgrimage, but they were not a part of a war. Historians still argue whether the Children's Crusade was a real historical event or a myth born of a desire to find a pure and innocent moment in a world of profound hypocrisy. Was this a real tragedy, or a cautionary tale? From your perspective, it was a heartbreaking end to a cause that had started with such pure and pious intentions. They were a reminder that faith alone is not enough to win a war. You feel a deep sense of despair. The end is coming. The Crusades are now a thing of the past. The grand, theatrical shows of force have given way to a series of smaller, more localized conflicts. The Crusader states are now a series of isolated, vulnerable outposts, a shadow of their former selves. The Holy Land is a place of profound conflict, a place where the memory of the Crusades is a source of profound hatred and profound pride. The 2 centuries of holy war have left a profound and lasting legacy, a legacy of blood and a legacy of ideas. You are an old man, and you have seen it all. You have seen the first, glorious crusade, a crusade of faith and of hope. You have seen the second, a crusade of arrogance and of failure. You have seen the third, a crusade of heroes and of compromise. You have seen the fourth, a crusade of betrayal and of greed. You have seen it all. You have seen the best and the worst of humanity. And you have seen the profound and lasting impact of a single idea. A mainstream historical fact you are reflecting on is the profound and lasting legacy of the Crusades on both Europe and the Middle East. The Crusades changed the world. They opened up new trade routes. They brought new ideas and new technologies back to Europe, and they helped to forge a new sense of European identity. They also left a legacy of profound hatred and distrust between the Christian and Muslim worlds, a legacy that is still a source of conflict today. A curious tidbit you reflect on is that many of the modern ideas of heroism and of chivalry were born from the romanticized image of the Crusader, a man who was a blend of piety and of brutality. The Crusades, in the end, were a failure. They did not retake the Holy Land. They did not secure the Holy City. They did not unite Christendom, but they did change the world. They were a powerful and profound movement, a movement of faith, of hope, of arrogance, and of greed. They were a testament to the profound and lasting power of a single idea, and they were a warning of the profound and lasting consequences of that idea. Historians still argue whether the Crusades were a profound and noble cause or a brutal and hypocritical act of violence. Were they a testament to the profound piety of a generation, or a brutal act of conquest disguised as a holy war? From your perspective, they were a little bit of both. They were a powerful and profound movement, a movement that changed the world for the better and for the worse. You look back on your own journey, on the dust, the thirst, the hunger, the battles, the betrayals, and the compromises, and you realize that you were a part of something that was both a profound success and a profound failure. The end is here. The 2 centuries of holy war are coming to a close. The Crusader states, a shadow of their former selves, are now a series of small, isolated outposts, a monument to a cause that has failed. The final, brutal reality is a place called Acre, the very city you helped take so many years ago. It is now the last bastion of the Crusader cause, and it is a city that is destined to fall. You are a very old man now, and you are living out your final days in a small, humble home in the Holy Land. You are not fighting in this final battle. You are too old for that now, but you hear the stories, and they are a living eulogy. The final siege of Acre is a brutal, bloody, and desperate affair. The Crusaders, a small, isolated group of men, are no match for the massive and unified army that has come to destroy them. The city is a scene of profound panic and chaos. The people are running through the streets. Their faces a mask of fear and despair. They know what is coming. They know that this is the end of the Crusader dream. The city falls. And the last of the Crusaders are either killed or sold into slavery. The Crusader states are no more. A mainstream historical fact you are hearing is the final and definitive end of the Crusader states. The fall of Acre was not just a military defeat, it was a psychological one. It was a sign that the Crusader dream was over, that the European kingdoms had no more will to fight. The Holy War, for all its power and its purpose, was over. A curious tidbit you hear from a traveller is that the last of the Crusaders, in their desperation, tried to escape on a few small boats, a final and pathetic sign of their profound defeat. You remember the powerful, proud ships of the Third Crusade from Section 36, and you feel a profound sense of sadness. The 2 centuries of holy war are over. The Crusader states, a monument to a cause that has failed, are now a memory. The Holy Land is now a place of peace, a place where the memory of the Crusades is a source of profound hatred and profound hope. You are a very old man, and you have seen it all. You have seen the best and the worst of humanity, and you have seen the profound and lasting impact of a single idea. You are a witness to a great moment in history, a moment that was both a profound success and a profound failure. Historians still argue whether the end of the Crusades was a result of a series of military defeats or a simple matter of the European kingdoms losing the will to fight. Did they fail because they were defeated, or did they simply give up? From your perspective, it was a little bit of both. They were a powerful and a profound movement, but they were also a movement that was destined to fail. The war is over, the journey is over, the Crusader dream is over. Now, dim the lights. Let's not think about all that fighting and all that dust anymore. Let's let the images fade away. The sounds of the marching and the shouting replaced by the soft hum of the wind outside. The memories are distant now, like old maps with faded lines, the endless road, the scorching sun, the chilling rain. They're all just echoes in the quiet of this room. The grand ambitions and the harsh realities are finally at rest. You don't have to carry the weight of a crusade anymore. The journey is over, and you have found a quiet harbour. The sleep that is coming is a deep and peaceful one. A sleep free from the clang of swords and the call of trumpets, just the soft whisper of the night, a gentle breath that fades into the dark. End of script. Sweet dreams.